Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Fanfiction podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. Today, we're diving into a brand new story. What if Belle has the power of infinity and 4 eyes? Before we jump in, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. Chapter 1, A Magic Never Seen Before. As I, Belle Cranel, walked through the woods with my grandpa, a wolf attacked me. But as it pounced and some time passed, I somehow didn't feel anything. So, since I closed my eyes in fright, I slowly opened them, and to my utter amazement and a shocking realization about my current position that started settling in, I smiled right into my would-be attacker's face as I was guided by some sort of instinct and brought forth my arm while I said the following words: "Cursed technique reversal, red as." Suddenly a red ball impacted the predator, pushing him away while tearing a chunk of his head off where the ball hit. The impact area was blown off, and I saw what was inside the wolf, which amounted to nothing much, really, but I also noticed ambient energies around us, which felt like magic that Gramps always described in those heroic tales of his. So being the curious half-elf, half-human that I was, I decided to pull on it, and suddenly I felt a motherly and soothing voice telling me about those strange events that happened not too long ago. Gaia, the personification of Earth herself, felt a pull on her energy and decided to have this boy be guided by her, as she wanted to have some fun, and as she was considered a goddess, she also derived that exhilaration from watching mortals live their lives, and now she wanted to have a strong boy to shake up things for those young upstarts who called themselves gods. Thus she pulled him in a telepathic link to give him advice and some gifts, as he was the only person in millennia to use the ambient magic from around himself. "Hello child, I am the earth you walk upon, and you piqued my interest. That is why I will help you a little." Asterisk, he asterisk, her voice rang out only for the boy, Belle Cranel, to hear. "Wait, you're the earth? That's so awesome. Please teach me. I want to be the strongest there ever was. Or will be, please." He responded to her and made her smile in delight, as she thought to herself, forgetting that they are linked currently. "Oh, he's so cute in his powers and soul. Oh, you'll be such a charmer, and the strongest mommy." Gaia will make sure of it. Asterisk giggles mischievously. Asterisk, Belle gulps as he hears what she said. "I'll try my best, Miss Gaia," he replied, momentarily astounding her, but she notices and moves on. "I, Gaia, impart my knowledge about you and your powers to you, and will give you Alfia's, your aunt's powers, which are Alfia's monstrous talent." Alfia was mentioned to be extremely talented, able to easily overpower both Riveri and Gareth, both of whom were high level 5 at the time. Despite being a mage, she was part of the vanguard, being able to fight with both magic and melee, excelling with a grace and mastery far above that of a magic swordman, and was considered to be unorthodox even within the Familia. She overcame the gap between levels, having a power above level 7. Her might was so great that she would have had a chance of defeating the captain of the Familia, who was level 9. Alfia's abilities were such a cheat that, if the captains of the Zeus and Familias were the same level as her, she would have been guaranteed to win. In addition to that, she would have been able to face a Juggernaut from the 70th floor, and, in case the monster didn't defeat her in the first 20 seconds of the fight, she would have been the winner. According to Riveria, Alfia would have been able to surpass level 7 if it wasn't for her incurable illness. Along with Zold, they were the most powerful characters introduced in the entire franchise so far. At the time of their debut, after Albert, Alfia's immense physical prowess, as a level 7, Alfia's physical abilities were all immeasurably superior to those of a normal person. In terms of raw physical prowess, her abilities were also exponentially superior to those of any level 6 or below. Her immense strength, Alfia was extremely strong. She easily caught the attack of a level 3 Kagaya close to leveling up, with her katana using only 2 fingers. While imitating Zold's swordsmanship, she managed to blow away a high level 5 Gareth and the Astrea Familia, even destroying the shield Gareth used to protect them. Her extreme speed, agility, and reflexes, according to the author, Alfia's response speed would have been faster than the speed of a Juggernaut born on the 70th floor. Even with her physical prowess reduced to that of a level 5 or level 4 at most, she was so fast that the entire Astrea Familia, including a high level 3 Elise, strengthened by Egoris Alvacinth and Lubrud Bequia, was unable to stop her as she recited the super-long chant of Geno's Angelus. Immense durability, even with her body ravaged by her illness and her physical prowess reduced to that of a level 5 or level 4 at most. Alfia survived being hit by an explosion from the Egoris Alvacinth of a high level 3 Eyest strengthened by Lubrud Bequia and the Luminous wind off a high level 3 Ryu, although she was mortally wounded by their combined attack. Extreme endurance, stamina, and mind, Alfia had immeasurable reserves of stamina and pain tolerance that allowed her to fight for considerable periods of time and easily overwhelm first-class adventurers even with her genetic illness. She could also keep Silentium Eden active at all times even though it consumed a large amount of mind. However, if she fought for long periods of time, her condition began to severely weaken her. This forced her to take a long rest after a battle before she could fight effectively again due to her condition remaining inactive for several days between her first and second appearance in the Great Feud. In her final battle against the Astrea Familia, she fought against the adventurers for a few hours before her illness began to affect her to a significant degree. Even after being severely weakened, her combat ability reduced to that of a level 5 or level 4 at most, and vomiting an inconceivable amount of blood, Alfia continued to fight and was able to face all of her opponents at the same time. Later, her body was burned and fully covered in wounds, including a fatal one from Elise and Ryu's final attack. Additionally, it made her vomit much more blood. However, she still managed to get up, and despite being in an extremely fragile state and looking like she was going to collapse at any moment, she could give them a few words and walk a certain distance before letting herself fall to her death. Copying, Alfia was able to copy movements she saw once but was unable to copy physical attributes. She was shown using Zold's swordsmanship. Enhanced senses. After acquiring her Falna, Alfia's senses became much better than those of a normal person. Her senses further improved with each subsequent rank up. Concurrent chanting, a high-level technique involving casting magic while fighting or moving around. Its difficulty is likened to dealing with a bomb with both hands while fighting due to the chance of failing a chant or not being able to control their own magic power. Limit off a temporary state in which surrounding conditions combine with emotion to overload the Falna. It exponentially increased the power of Alfia's attacks. Despite its quite conditional nature, Alfia was able to deliver attacks strengthened by this state at will due to her skill gift blessing. Magic Satana's Virion. Satana's Virion is a super short chant magic that hit enemies with blocks of sound. Despite its rather simple nature, it was extremely powerful and deadly. A single direct hit was easily able to deal with a whole group of Ganesha Familia members as well as a high-level 5 Gareth, having such power that Ryu and her comrades were also able to sense the attacks even from the other side of Orario in the case of the latter. The shockwaves produced by the attacks alone could easily defeat upper-class adventurers. Thanks to its super short chant, it could be used quickly, and even Welf's Will-O-Wisp would have been unable to interrupt it. It possessed a wide range of effects such that it managed to hit the entire Astrea Familia without even leaving them a chance to escape. The magic severely disturbed the senses of those struck by it. When she was struck by a shockwave, Lyra ended up bleeding from her nose, ears, and eyes. Her vision became blurry and her sense of balance was shattered. Since they were only sound, it was impossible to see the attacks. The magic power that remained after using it could also be made to explode with the spell key, Lugio. Unlike other spell keys, which make homing projectiles or beams explode, this one turned her magic into a 2-stage barrage. The generated explosions possessed an attack power equal to that of the blocks of sound. Alfia became capable of using a greater extent of this magic's power after turning off Silentium Eden, although her dress still greatly reduced its offensive capability, preventing her from using it at its full potential. Doing so greatly increased its power, even though her target was the Astrea Familia and not the monster. The shockwaves produced by Satana's Virion significantly injured Delphine, a level 6 or 7 monster with a great regenerative ability and whose resilience prevented a pair of high-level 5s Reveria and Gareth from inflicting any damage to it at all, and made it scream in pain. Its after effects also managed to reach Orario itself all the way from the 18th floor, as Asfi could feel slight tremors from the dungeon that came from Alfia's blast. Silentium Eden. Silentium Eden is a super short enchant. Magic that covered Alfia's body in magic negating armor. Since she was completely covered by it, the magic gave her full magic protection, since any attack would be nullified regardless of the direction it came from. She kept it on at all times and it required her to use a large amount of mind to sustain it. Alfia used to raise her arm when nullifying an attack to fool her opponents and give the impression that it was a magical barrier. Despite its ability to nullify external magic attacks, the true nature of her magic laid in its ability to greatly diminish the power of her own magic. Alfia described it as that it wasn't an armor but rather a seal to keep her own noise within herself. Genos Angelus, unlike her other two magic, Genos Angelus had a super long chant and was powerful enough that Gareth mentioned it could destroy the entire 18th floor. It caused a gigantic silver-gray bell to manifest above Alfia's head and had an effect range of over 100 meters. Its destructive potential was such that it was even capable of killing the Leviathan. However, its usage carried a serious disadvantage, since it worsened Alfia's health condition, having seriously aggravated after its use against the legendary sea monster. Skill's Gift Blessing, a skill that was the manifestation of Alfia's incurable disease. In exchange for making her status be in the limit of state all the time, it made Alfia suffer multiple abnormalities such as poison, paralysis, and dysfunction at the same time when she entered combat. Upon activation, it also caused Alfia's stats, stamina, and mind to continuously decrease semi-permanently. The author described it as that it caused a 5% decrease in her health, mind, and all her abilities every turn. As time passed, it weakened her at an accelerated rate. Although it couldn't be cured, eating a branch of a sacred tree from an elven forest, which possessed great magical power, improved her condition. Amvel Ardor Development Abilities Mage. Mage improved the power of Alfia's magic, widened effect range, and made mind usage efficient. It also created a colored magic circle under Alfia when she used magic. The ability granted her a magic stat equivalent to that of a level 8. Abnormal resistance. Abnormal resistance negated the effect of abnormalities such as poison. Alfia had reached rank E, so she had an extremely high resistance to adverse effects. Just at rank G, almost nothing can affect one, even the strongest poisons in high doses. Magic resistance. Spirit Pleasure. Supreme Light, along with a few skills to raise your powers accordingly. She tells him as she proceeds to buff his mind reserves, his body to always be in the perfect shape, and the skills, reverse. Cursed Techink, that heals him nigh instantaneously and cures all types of negative influences for him, soul knowledge magic. Control, understanding, and methods of use, immunity for all arcanium. And Lyaris Freeze, a passive skill that exponentially increases the rate at which Bel's strength grows for as long as his feelings towards the one he's in love with don't change. However, since his stats only change after a status update, this is not applicable in a combat situation. Years later, now that I'm done training and building a good foundation and his grandfather unfortunately died, he would leave and go to try and become an adventurer worthy of the heroic stories told to him, and overall just live a nice life with some fighting on the side. A man's true dream. I'm leaving, guys. His voice rang out as he made his way to the path that led straight to the city known as Orario. As I continued to walk the walk, I heard some pretty familiar noises from all around me. Monsters. I thought to myself, welp, nothing better than a nice slug fight with monsters to wake me in the mornings. With the end of that final thought, I opened my gaslighting mouth and yelled at my surroundings like an annoyed yet excited kid. Show yourselves, or I'll find you lot, and you definitely don't want that, do you? As soon as I finished my instigating yelling, many goblins and kobolds along with one silverback ape rushed at me, making me smile widely as highly condensed and powerful magic could be observed around my fists, while both sides rushed at one another, roaring all the while. I rushed the group of 10 kobolds with my lap's blue-infused fists. As I pummeled them, some goblins thought they would sneak attack me. I would let them think that till it's too late, as my left hand grabbed the Final cobalt, and pushed him into the path of the 5 goblins, and my right swiped out, easily cleaving through them and leaving 5 terrified goblins and 1 excited gorilla. Now, all of you at once, come at me. I shout and stand ready, though others may say I'm about to fall asleep. I quickly dispose of the goblins and look at the big silverback, who rushes at me with battle lust glowing in his insane eyes. I guess I'll use some of my other magic now, and with that I silently cast the spell chain I liked quite a lot. Satana's Virion and Lugio. This attack chain shoots a block of sound at the designated target and the key. Lugio causes the magic to explode, thus leaving nothing but the magic. Stone of the Ape and Io collect all 21 stones, which in Orario would let me sleep at her until I get into a Familia, which is a team headed by a god whose blessing is carried by its members. The excitement makes me go quicker, and soon I reach it, the City of Opportunities, Orario. I figured it out with the help of the huge tower known as the Babel Tower, which is renowned as the tallest building in Genkai, or the mortal world, and it is also known as the entrance to the dungeon. But my excitement dies down faster than ever as I look forward and see it. The bane of my existence, the most terrifying of all-time robbers, a huge line of people of various species, cats and way more other things I don't care to name. Thus I do the only thing I can do in such circumstances, wait. As I finally was the one to register, and if nothing weird happens, I'll soon be able to become an adventurer. Hello, stranger. Introduce yourself and give us the reason for visit. A calm voice rang out in my ears. I heard it many times now due to the people who were in front of me. I looked at the nondescript looking guard and had one single thought running through my mind. What an NPC. Deciding to not keep the guy waiting and geocaring at my beauty, I introduced myself along with stating my wish to become an adventurer. I am Bell Cranel, I'm 14 years old, and I came here in search of a grand adventure and to become an adventurer of Orario. I decided to show confidence and pride to come off strong, which I was. But no one knew yet. Later, after the registration procedure, I entered the city of Orario and had my mind blown, not merely due to the buildings and happy air that is everywhere you look, but the sheer amount of magical and divine energy that I can perceive and absorb. Thus I let out a happy grin and started following those thoughts and absorbed some free divine and magical energy to grow mine and enhance my body. After all, merely using magic or mind as it's called here wouldn't be enough to become a powerhouse. I will have to sneak into various kingdoms and raid their libraries along with treasuries to get my hands on those juicy and powerful spells, weapons, etc. As I planned on how not to become known as a world-class criminal due to mass robbery in multiple continents all over the world, I finally arrived at a building, namely, the Guild. The main building of the Guild is called the Pantheon. It is a wide space with counters for adventurers to talk with their advisors and also has an exchange area. There are also small meeting boxes where adventurers can talk one-on-one with their advisor without anyone else hearing them. Aside from that, there is a library area. Most employees work on the first floor of the building while the high-ranking officials work on the second floor. As the slighter at the grandeur of the Pantheon subsided, I confidently strided up the stairs to enter and maybe start this journey already, as I'm slowly but surely getting really annoyed at how long all this entering took. At the moment of my entry into the guild, many eyes, mostly female, fell on me and I instantly felt a tsunami worth of attraction directed toward me. I think I start to understand Freya, which is too disturbing to continue on this thought, so let's evaluate the people here. The interior was as grand as the outside, and the lively atmosphere of the people of various kinds was also contagious, ignoring the mass of women undressing me with their eyes and the urge to say, "Eyes up here, girls." I went up to the counter and cleared my throat to get the blushing elf girl named Aina Chul to get her to snap out of her horny dreamland and back to me. "Hi there, my fair lady. I am Bell Cranel, and I would like to register as an adventurer, along with finding a god or goddess to join their Familia. Would you please help me with that?" "Sure, Mr. Cranel. I'd love to assist you with that. Just wait a little, I have to get a list with the gods and goddesses who are recruiting currently." She bubbled like a teen in love and scampered off to who knows where to get that list. Later I left the guild, having been admitted to be an adventurer, and saying that I'd not go to the dungeon, a total lie, but who cares? So like a good bad boy, I turned around and went in the direction of the huge, cylindrically shaped skyscraper that is known to be the Tower of Babel. Alright, let's see what that dungeon is all about. After a boring dungeon dive filled with weak and dim-witted monsters, if you could call such weaklings by that name, I decided to go and join Freya. The reason behind my actions is fairly simple. The members were a strong and many, and the goddess had almost all beings in Orario wrapped around her fingers. And I wanted to seduce her too, who wouldn't? Want a goddess of fertility, beauty, love, sex, war, and finally magical arts from the Norse pantheon. I wanted to pique her interest even more than just the transparency of bells or well my soul, so I wanted to talk to her privately, which made me go to the hostess of fertility. Now I want to review the main things I heard when asking about it. The hostess of fertility sits on a brick-lined street. It is a 2-story building made of stone that has the depth of a neat inn. As it is located along the Western Main Street, it is usually filled with a lot of owner, MIA Grand. Opened the pub after she semi-retired as an adventurer. The pub caters to citizens during the afternoon and adventurers during the night. Their menu and prices change between the two times. The hostess of fertility has a separate wooden building that has a large inner garden. A separate building had been planned to be built there, but was cancelled, leaving the garden vacant. However, due to the planned construction, a section of the garden was paved with stone. All the staff of the hostess of fertility pub are female. It is an interracial business, accepting employees from all races, and is full of people with shady pasts that MIA took in and takes care of. As the employees are used to fighting, any unwanted behavior can cause people to be thrown out of the pub and out onto the street, something passerby are used to seeing. They possess strength of upper class adventurers, able to fight against the Freya Familia's level 3 to 4 members. Majority of them have converted to the Demeter and endured Familias. Now I think I should be entering, considering those strange looks I am receiving currently. I thought and entered through the double doors. Freya, POV. I finally found him, my order, my chosen one. Today a new soul appeared in Orario and I was curious, so like any self-respecting goddess does, I decided to watch him using my mirror. And he was so beautiful, I had to go to the bathroom as I was currently disguised as SYR Flova and not my true form as Freya. I couldn't help but silently moan at the mere thought of him, and as I was waiting for new customers to come in I saw him enter and my heart skipped a beat or two at the sight in front of my eyes. Tall, muscular frame, ethereally white hair that seemed to frame his face in a perfect way, clad in a white loose button-up shirt and form-fitting pants that displayed just how muscular he was in the outline of his. I could continue this trail of thought, because if I did I truly don't know if I could hold myself. Foo, I giggled into my hand to hide my skyrocketing arousal and greeted him. Hello customer. What can I do for you? Bell, POV. As I entered I saw SYR, but I saw with 6 eyes that Freya was holding the reins for now. On the surface, SYR appears to be a normal human girl. She has bluish-gray hair that she keeps tied with a small knot in a ponytail hairstyle. Her eyes are the same color as her hair, and she has a light peachy-colored smooth skin. She wears a white blouse and a leaf-colored knee-length long skirt. She also wears a slightly long half-apron around her waist. She wears a pair of brown boots over black stockings. As I finished my appreciation of her and she with me, she started the conversation. Hello customer. What can I do for you? Well, I'd like to have a chat with you. Do you have a both free for the both of us? I asked smoothly, with a flirtatious look and smile and an emphasis on the you, which she more likely than not has understood due to the slight widening of her pretty eyes. Then she replied with sure, let's go, and led me to sit in a more remote setting in the hostess. Knowing my plan of stunning her with knowing her true identity worked, I talked with her and asked to join her Familia, and threw in, I sensed you looking at me in the dungeon. Are you by any chance enamored with me? With a teasing wink direct her way. She giggled and said I could join, not answering, or rather I believe she was too shy to admit those feelings yet. After SYR's shift ended we left the pub and went to Babel, where I met the real her, who was pleasuring herself and saying my name. So like any gentleman would do I got her attention, kissed her knuckle, introduced myself to her and said that I want to join her Familia and said into her, if you want, I could conquer your dungeon too. I'm certain we both would love that. As Freya EXE stopped working for a couple of minutes, I let her come back from La La Land and she applied the Falna blessing to me. The change was instantaneous. I felt about thrice as strong as before, and I also felt a link to Freya, which was a cool teasing method. As evening turned night, Freya wanted to sleep next to me, so she took me by my hand, mashed it between her huge breasts and guided me to her sleeping quarters to finally have a good night's sleep, to which a no wasn't the answer I'd ever give. After a nice and filling breakfast worthy of an immensely powerful Familia, I and the other members went up the arena and started the day with healthy dose of fighting, and it shouldn't be any other way. As I made my way down the pure white stairs, I heard a voice ask me for a spar. As I turned to agree, my excitement got visibly amplified. You could see it due to the face-splitting battle-hungry grin on my handsome face. Otter, the king, the only level 7 in Orario, challenged me, and I was gonna use some of my cursed techniques to beat him. This spar was quickly made into an exhibition match, because the whole Familia was watching, and Freya, being Freya, touched herself in anticipation. It was a magic hand-to-hand battle, and I was so ready for it. We stood in front of each other and had eye contact until begin. A person shouted and we both flashed from our places to meet in a clash of fists. He was stronger than me, but not for long. This changed when I used magical reinforcement to fortify my defenses in addition to increasing my physical power, which allowed me to push him off balance and keep on the move as I landed a blue-infused punch to his gut. The result shocked all the people watching. Otter bent over and vomited. I let him have his respite, and after he stood again I saw it. He finally thought me a rival. This level of acknowledgement made me feel accomplished and happy, so I decided to use Satana's Virion. But I didn't say it out loud. I thought the chant. As expected, a block of sound flew and hit the almost recovered king and knocked him out for good. Now, what followed was a moment of stunned silence and then cheers and laughter. The members of Freya Familia and her herself rushed to congratulate me and to shake my hand. I felt good that I had a guy against whomst I could let loose with, and mentally said, Otter, you're kinda weak. As a joke, the winner of the spar was allowed to make a quote for the Familia, and I decided to use a line I thought about after I mastered my powers and fought an army of widely powerful surface monsters at the age of 8 or 9, and that line I spoke was, throughout heaven and earth, I alone am the honored one. Sometime later, the deep, cavernous halls of the dungeon were bathed in an eerie blue glow, the kind that made the air itself feel heavy with foreboding. Bel Cranel, no longer the originally naive boy who once dreamed of becoming a hero, stood at the precipice of the 55th floor, his mismatched eyes, one a deep crimson, the other a crystalline blue, scanning the darkness ahead with an almost bored expression. Beside him, Otter, the towering Boaz warrior and captain of the Freya Familia, stood like an immovable mountain. His defeat at Bel's hands had shaken the very foundation of the Familia, yet it had also forged a mutual respect between them. Otter had never met anyone like Bel, and now they stood together, not as rivals, but as comrades in arms, ready to delve deeper into the dungeon than they had ever dared before. We're going to need more than brute strength to survive what lies ahead, Otter rumbled, his deep voice echoing off the stone walls. Bel smirked, a hint of cocky nonchalance in his expression. That's why I'm here, isn't it? Besides, brute strength isn't all I have. The air was thick with anticipation, but Bel's demeanor remained light. He toyed with the edge of his blindfold, a stylistic choice he had adopted not out of necessity, but because it suited him. His power, inherited from Gojo and Alfia, was formidable. The fusion of Gojo's boundless confidence and Alfia's terrifying potential made him a force unlike any other. Bel reached into his pouch and pulled out a glowing crystal orb, the monster bait. This should make things interesting, he said, tossing it up and catching it with ease. Let's see what the dungeon has in store for us. With a flick of his wrist, he activated the orb, and a low hum filled the air, reverberating through the dungeon walls. The ground beneath them trembled slightly, and the oppressive silence of the 55th floor was shattered by distant roars. and growls. Otter tightened his grip on his massive axe, his muscles tensing in anticipation. You're not afraid of what might come? Afraid? Bell echoed, a playful grin spreading across his face. I'm excited. The first wave of monsters surged from the shadows, their eyes glowing with a murderous intent. Bell's grin widened as he raised his hand, a surge of energy crackling around his fingers. Cursed technique, lapse blue, he murmured, his voice almost too relaxed. A wave of crushing force swept across the room, pulling the monsters together in a tight cluster where they struggled against the invisible grip. Otter moved in like a predator, his axe cleaving through the gathered horde with terrifying efficiency. Each swing was precise, deliberate, a testament to his years of experience. But this was only the beginning. As the last of the initial wave fell, the dungeon responded with a wrathful roar. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows growing longer, deeper, until they seemed almost alive. The air grew colder, and Bell could feel the dungeon's fury, a palpable presence pressing down on them. It's not happy, Bell observed, his voice tinged with amusement. Otter, always the pragmatist, nodded. We're provoking it. If we're not careful, we'll summon the Juggernaut. That's the idea, Bell replied while he snapped his fingers in realization, his grin never fading. We need to push ourselves further, don't we? No point in holding back now. Another tremor rocked the dungeon, and this time, the ground beneath their feet began to crack. Bell's eyes glimmered with excitement. The true test was about to begin. As the floor beneath them gave way, Bell and Otter plunged into the abyss, falling through a series of narrow tunnels that twisted and turned with reckless abandon. The icy wind whipped past them as they descended, the temperature dropping with each passing second. Bell's heart raced, not from fear, but from exhilaration. This was what he lived for, the thrill of the unknown, the promise of a challenge unlike any other. With a deafening crash, they landed on the 65th floor. The impact sent a shockwave through the icy terrain, but both warriors emerged from the fall unscathed, their bodies fortified by years of battle-hardened experience. Bell rose first, brushing off the frost that clung to his clothes. He glanced around, taking in their surroundings. The floor was a vast, frozen wasteland, with jagged ice formations jutting out like the teeth of some great beast. The walls of the cavern were coated in a thick layer of ice, reflecting the dim blue light that seemed to emanate from the very air itself. Otter joined Bell, his axe held at the ready. His breath came out in visible puffs of steam as he surveyed the icy expanse. This floor, it's colder than the 59th, he muttered, his voice tinged with concern. Bell nodded, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. We're in the heart of the dungeon. Now, it's not going to let us pass without a fight. As if on cue, the dungeon stirred to life around them. The ice beneath their feet began to crack and split, and from the fissures emerged a horde of monsters, their forms twisted and grotesque. They were unlike anything Bell had encountered before, massive, ice-covered creatures with jagged claws and glowing, sapphire eyes. Their roars filled the cavern, a cacophony of rage that sent shivers of battle hunger down Bell's spine. I jinxed it, didn't I? Bell said while cracking his knuckles. Frost, wolves, ice drakes, and what's that? Bell pointed at a colossal figure emerging from the shadows, a towering monster with an icy exoskeleton that gleamed in the dim light. It was a frost giant, one of the most feared creatures in the depths of the dungeon. Otter's grip tightened on his axe. Frost giants, formidable adversaries. We'll need to be careful. But Bell was already in motion, his excitement overpowering any sense of caution. Careful. What's that, is it? Eatable. Sounds like some disgusting stuff, though, he said while sticking his tongue out in mock disgust. He leaped forward, his hand outstretched as he called forth his power. Cursed technique, lapse. Blue. The air around him shimmered as the gravitational force pulled the frost wolves together, their howls of fury cut short as they were crushed under the intense pressure. But Bell didn't stop there. He darted forward, his movements fluid and precise, as he unleashed a barrage of strikes imbued with blue as usual, his fists moving faster than the eye could follow. Each hit landed with the force of a sledgehammer, shattering the icy armor of the monsters with ease. Otter watched in awe as Bell tore through the horde, his power a blur, of motion and destruction. It was clear that Bell had grown far beyond what he had been during their first encounter. The boy who he had once been evenly matched with was now a force of nature, a whirlwind of energy and raw power. It seems I have failed to keep up, Bell. Otter muttered with an almost unnoticeable smile as he continued, watching Bell fight. But the dungeon was relentless. For every monster Bell felled, many more took its place. The frost drakes circled overhead, their icy breath freezing everything in its path. One of them dove towards Bell, its jaws wide open, ready to snap him in half. But Bell was faster. He jumped over the attack, his hands shooting out, a whirlwind of motion. "Pathetic weakling," he shouted, and his hands grabbed his upper and lower jaws, and with a grunt of exertion he tore the drake in half, horizontally. Seconds later a red blast lit up in Bell's hand. The repulsive force exploded from his hand, sending another weird, ghastly monster crashing into the cavern wall. With a bone-shattering impact, Otter moved in to cover Bell's flank, his axe cleaving through the horde with brutal efficiency. His strikes were methodical, each one designed to take down the monsters with the least amount of effort. He knew Bell was more than capable of handling the brunt of the assault, so he focused on keeping the monsters off his back, ensuring that none could get close enough to take him by surprise. The frost giant roared as it lumbered towards Bell, its massive fists slamming into the ground with enough force to send tremors through the ice. Bell turned to face it, a wild grin on his face. This was what he had been waiting for, a true challenge. He met the giant's charge head-on, his body a blur as he darted to face the huge fist rushing towards himself. With a maniacal smile and laugh, he shot his fist out and met its massive blows. The giant's fists came down like hammers, but Bell was equal in terms of physical strength, thus nullifying its one advantage, its strength. His movements, too, quick for the behemoth to follow. He leaped onto the giant's arm, racing up its length towards its head. "Let's see how you handle this," Bell muttered as he reached the giant's shoulder. He planted his foot on the huge monster's shoulder and swung his foot in a soccer kick-like fashion. "Let's see if it knuckles," Bell roared as he kicked the giant's head hard. A massive shockwave of Bell's right foot and the head of the monster colliding shot out from the point of impact, slamming into the surroundings with devastating power. The giant slumped to the floor, its icy armor cracking under the impact. But it wasn't what Bell focused on. He saw the head making a perfect arc, and as it landed, it hit a drake hard enough to bring it down, headless. Well. Bell leaped back, landing gracefully on the ice as the giants roared in anger. "You're tough," he admitted, a hint of respect in his voice. "But I'm tougher." Otter joined him, standing at his side as the monsters rushed at them. "Together," the Boaz warrior said, his voice steady. Bell nodded, his grin widening. "Together." The two charged as one, Otter's axe blazing with magical energy as he struck at the monsters all around, while Bell unleashed a flurry of blows at the ones Otter wasn't taking. The beasts roared in defiance, but they were no match for the combined might of the two warriors. With a final, thunderous crash, the frost monsters fell, their bodies shattering into 1,000 pieces of ice. As the last of the monsters were defeated, the icy cavern fell silent, the only sound the heavy breathing of the two fighters. Bell looked around at the carnage they had wrought, the excitement slowly fading as the reality of their situation set in. This was only the 65th floor. There were still deeper, darker places to explore, and far more dangerous foes to face. Otter placed a hand on Bell's shoulder, a gesture of camaraderie. "You fought well, Bell Cranel. But this is only the beginning." Bell nodded, his mismatched eyes filled with determination. "I know, and I can't wait to see what comes next." As they prepared to move on, Bell couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, something far more powerful than anything they had faced so far. The dungeon was alive, and it was angry. But Bell was ready. Whatever the dungeon threw at him, he would face it head-on, with Otter at his side and the strength of his resolve guiding him forward. This was his story, and it was far from over. After a nice and filling breakfast worthy of an immensely powerful Familia, I and the other members went up the arena and started the day with a healthy dose of fighting, and it shouldn't be any other way. As I made my way down the pure white stairs, I heard a voice ask me for a spar. As I turned to agree, my excitement got visibly amplified. You could see it due to the face splitting battle-hungry grin on my handsome face. Otter, the king, the only level 7 in Orario, challenged me, and I was gonna use some of my cursed techniques to beat him. This spar was quickly made into an exhibition match because the whole Familia was watching, and Freya, being Freya, touched herself in anticipation. It was a magic a hand-to-hand battle, and I was so ready for it. Wested in front o' each other, and had eye contact until begin. A person shouted and we both flashed from our places to meet in a clash of fists. He was stronger than me, but not for long. This changed when I used magical reinforcement to fortify my defenses in addition to increasing my physical power, which allowed me to push him off balance and keep on the move as I landed a blue-infused punch to his gut. The result shocked all the people watching. Otter bent over and vomited. I let him have his respite, and after he stood again I saw it. He finally thought me a rival. This level of acknowledgement made me feel accomplished and happy, so I decided to use Satana's Virion, but I didn't say it out loud. I thought the chant. As expected, a block of sound flew and hit the almost recovered king and knocked him out for good. Now, what followed was a moment of stunned silence and then cheers and laughter. The members of Freya, Familia, and her herself rushed to congratulate me and to shake my hand. I felt good that I had a guy against whomst I could let loose with, and mentally said, Otter, you're kinda weak. As a joke, the winner of the spar was allowed to make a quote for the Familia, and I decided to use a line I thought about after I mastered my powers and fought an army of widely powerful surface monsters at the age of 8 or 9, and that line I spoke was, throughout heaven and earth, I alone am the honored one. Sometime later, the deep, cavernous halls of the dungeon were bathed in an eerie blue glow, the kind that made the air itself feel heavy with foreboding. Bel Cranel, no longer the originally naive boy who once dreamed of becoming a hero, stood at the precipice of the 55th floor, his mismatched eyes, one a deep crimson, the other a crystalline blue, scanning the darkness ahead with an almost bored expression. Beside him, Otter, the towering Boaz warrior and captain of the Freya Familia, stood like an immovable mountain. His defeat at Bel's hands had shaken the very foundation of the Familia, yet it had also forged a mutual respect between them. Otter had never met anyone like Bel, and now they stood together, not as rivals, but as comrades in arms, ready to delve deeper into the dungeon than they had ever dared before. We're going to need more than brute strength to survive what lies ahead, Otter rumbled, his deep voice echoing off the stone walls. Bel smirked, a hint of cocky nonchalance in his expression. That's why I'm here, isn't it? Besides, brute strength isn't all I have. The air was thick with anticipation, but Bel's demeanor remained light. He toyed with the edge of his blindfold, a stylistic choice he had adopted, not out of necessity, but because it suited him. His power, inherited from Gojo and Alfia, was formidable. The fusion of Gojo's boundless confidence and Alfia's terrifying potential made him a force unlike any other. Bel reached into his pouch and pulled out a glowing crystal orb. The monster bait. This should make things interesting, he said, tossing it up and catching it with ease. Let's see what the dungeon has in store for us. With a flick of his wrist, he activated the orb, and a low hum filled the air, reverberating through the dungeon walls. The ground beneath them trembled slightly, and the oppressive silence of the 55th floor was shattered by distant roars and growls. Otter tightened his grip on his massive axe, his muscles tensing in anticipation. You're not afraid of what might come? Afraid? Bel echoed, a playful grin spreading across his face. I'm excited. The first wave of monsters surged from the shadows, their eyes glowing with a murderous intent. Bel's grin widened as he raised his hand, a surge of energy crackling around his fingers. Cursed technique. Lapse blue, he murmured, his voice almost too relaxed. A wave of crushing force swept across the room, pulling the monsters together in a tight cluster where they struggled against the invisible grip. Otter moved in like a predator, his axe cleaving through the gathered horde with terrifying efficiency. Each swing was precise, deliberate, a testament to his years of experience. But this was only the beginning. As the last of the initial wave fell, The dungeon responded with a wrathful roar. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows growing. Longer, deeper, until they seemed almost alive. The air grew colder, and Belle could feel the dungeon's fury, a palpable presence pressing down on them. "It's not happy," Belle observed, his voice tinged with amusement. Otter, always the pragmatist, nodded. "We're provoking it. If we're not careful, we'll summon the Juggernaut. That's the idea." Belle replied while he snapped his fingers in realization, his grin never fading. "We need to push ourselves further, don't we? No point in holding back now." Another tremor rocked the dungeon, and this time, the ground beneath their feet began to crack. Belle's eyes glimmered with excitement. The true test was about to begin. Belle stood over the fallen Dullahan, his chest rising and falling with the intensity of the battle. His fists still crackled with residual energy, the final remnants of the power he'd summoned for that last, decisive blow. The knight's dark armor lay scattered on the cracked ground, the cursed energy that had once animated it now dissipated into the air like mist at dawn. Silence settled over the barren landscape, the oppressive weight of the dungeon momentarily lifted. Otter approached, his heavy footsteps echoing in the stillness. His usually imposing figure was marred by exhaustion, his once pristine armor battered and scorched. Yet, despite the weariness etched on his face, there was a look of satisfaction in his eyes. They had faced the dungeon's horrors together and emerged victorious. He gave a single nod, his respect for Belle now solidified in the crucible of combat. "You fought well, Belle," Otter said, his voice deep and unwavering, yet tinged with a rare hint of approval. "But this is not the end. The true heart of the dungeon still lies ahead." Belle nodded, wiping the sweat from his brow. The victory was sweet, but Otter's words were a sober reminder that their journey was far from over. The gate loomed before them, its massive structure now silent and foreboding, as if guarding the secrets of the dungeon's deepest levels. They approached the gate together, their steps heavy with anticipation. The ancient runes carved into the obsidian surface pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. Belle could feel a dark energy emanating from within, a cold and unwelcoming presence that sent shivers down his spine. Whatever awaited them beyond this point was unlike anything they had faced before. Otter placed a hand on the gate, his fingers tracing the runes. "These markings, they speak of a world beyond death. The underworld, where the souls of the damned are said to wander for eternity." Belle swallowed hard, the weight of Otter's words sinking in. "So, this is it," he murmured. "The final test." Otter nodded, then, with a forceful push, the gate began to creak open. The ground trembled beneath them as the massive doors swung inward, revealing a swirling vortex of dark energy. A cold wind rushed out, carrying with it the faint whispers of voices, mournful, pleading, and filled with despair. Without hesitation, the two warriors stepped through the gateway, crossing the threshold into the unknown. Floor 80. The abyss. The transition was immediate and disorienting. One moment, they were standing in the barren wasteland of the 79th floor, and the next, they were plunged into darkness so complete it was as if light itself had been banished. The air was heavy and oppressive, pressing down on them from all sides. Belle could feel the dungeon's malevolent gaze upon them, more intense now than ever before. As their eyes adjusted to the darkness, they began to make out faint shapes and outlines in the gloom. They were in a vast cavern, the walls of which seemed to pulsate with a dark, otherworldly energy. The ground was uneven, covered in jagged rocks and twisted roots that seemed to writhe and coil on their own. But it was the atmosphere that was most unsettling. The air was thick with the scent of decay and something far worse, fear. It hung in the air like a palpable force, making it difficult to breathe, to think, to move. The whispers that had been faint before were now louder, more insistent, echoing through the cavern in a cacophony of tortured souls. Belle gritted his teeth, forcing himself to focus. He could feel his resolve wavering, the oppressive darkness gnawing at his confidence. But he couldn't afford to falter now, not after everything they had been through. He looked over at Otter, who stood like an immovable pillar of strength, his eyes scanning their surroundings for any sign of movement. "Stay close," Otter said, his voice cutting through the darkness. "This place, It feeds on fear. We mustn't let it break us. Bell nodded, steeling himself. He activated his infinity, a faint aura of neutral energy surrounding him, pushing back against the suffocating atmosphere. It was a small comfort, a reminder that he still had power. Here, that he wasn't completely at the mercy of this dark place. They moved forward cautiously, their senses on high alert. The cavern seemed to stretch on endlessly, the darkness pressing in on them. From all sides, every step they took echoed unnaturally, the sound distorted and warped by the dungeon's malevolent influence. As they ventured deeper, the ground began to slope downward, the air growing colder and more oppressive with each step. The whispers grew louder, more distinct, and Bell could almost make out words. Now, pleas for mercy, cries of anguish, voices begging for release from some unimaginable torment. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them gave way. Bell and Otter plunged downward, the darkness swallowing them whole. They landed hard on a cold, unforgiving surface. Bell groaned as he pushed himself to his feet, his body aching from the impact. He looked around, trying to get his bearings, but the darkness was impenetrable. Otter was already up, scanning the area for threats, his axe at the ready. "Where are we?" Bell asked, his voice pissed off due to the seemingly random fall as his reverse cursed technique fully finished fixing him up. Otter didn't answer immediately. Instead, he raised his hand, conjuring a small flame that flickered weakly in the darkness, barely illuminating their surroundings. They were in a vast chamber, the walls lined with what appeared to be ancient tombs. The air was thick with the stench of death and decay, and the whispers were louder now, filling the chamber with a constant, maddening drone. "This is the heart of the dungeon," Otter finally said, his voice grim. "The abyss. The place where the souls of the dead are said to be trapped for eternity." Bell felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard stories of the abyss, whispered tales among adventurers who spoke of it in hushed tones. No one had ever confirmed its existence, and those who claimed to have seen it had never returned to tell the tale. Before Bell could respond, the tombs began to shift. The stone lids slowly slid open, releasing a wave of cold, dark energy. From within the tombs emerged figures draped in tattered robes, their skeletal hands grasping ancient weapons. Their eyes glowed with an unholy light, and the air grew even colder as they stepped forward, their movements slow and deliberate. "Wraiths," Otter muttered, his grip tightening on his axe. "Souls bound to this place, forever cursed to guard the heart of the dungeon." Bell's heart pounded in his chest. These were no ordinary monsters. They were the remnants of adventurers who had fallen in the dungeon's depths, their souls twisted and corrupted by the abyss. They moved with a slow, deliberate grace, their eyes locked onto Bell, and Otter with a hunger that spoke of centuries of torment. Without a word, Bell charged forward, his fists blazing with cursed energy. He unleashed a flurry of strikes, but the wraiths seemed almost unaffected, their ethereal forms barely flinching under the onslaught. They responded with their own attacks, their weapons moving with unnatural speed, slicing through the air with a bone-chilling shriek. Otter joined the fray, his axe cleaving through the wraiths with brutal force, but for every one they destroyed, more emerged from the tombs. It was as if the abyss itself was determined to overwhelm them, to crush their spirits beneath the weight of its despair. Bell gritted his teeth, focusing his energy. He couldn't let them win. He couldn't let this place consume them. He called upon the new technique he had recently mastered, feeling the familiar surge of power as he combined his infinity with the reversal red. A small, pink orb formed in his hand, its surface crackling with energy. "Neutral. Reversal. Pink," he shouted, hurling the orb at the nearest group of wraiths. It worked as a fusion of the barrier or slowing down the opponent with the infinity part of the technique and the red part. Crushed the opponent with its repulsive properties against the barrier, thus crushing the target. The orb exploded on contact, a shockwave of pink energy rippling through the chamber. The wraiths caught in its path was slowed to a crawl, their movements sluggish and disjointed. As the orb's energy crushed them with the force of reversal red, their forms disintegrated into dust, leaving nothing behind but the faintest trace of cursed energy. But even as Bell unleashed his power, the abyss responded in kind. The ground beneath them began to tremble, and from the shadows emerged a figure larger and more imposing than the others, a lich, its skeletal form draped in regal robes, its eye sockets glowing with a dark, malevolent light. It raised a bony hand, and the wraiths seemed to rally around it, their attacks growing more coordinated, more ferocious. Bell felt his strength waning, the exhaustion of the battles finally catching up to him. Otter was faring no better, his movements slower, his strikes less forceful. They were being pushed back, the sheer numbers of the wraiths overwhelming them. Just as it seemed that all hope was lost, Bell's mismatched eyes flickered with a new understanding. He had awakened at the full power of his eyes. He decided to try one last thing. Before he took himself and his partner in crime out of here, he stood, in an almost too casual and calm pose, put a hand onto Otter's shoulder and held out his left hand. He then interlaced his middle finger behind his pointer finger and spoke, his voice a chilling whisper of death and destruction. Domain expansion, unlimited void. Abluk sphere enveloped both the duo and the monsters and hid it. Form sight, as it broke apart the duo emerged victorious and Bell teleported himself and Otter to the safety of floor 18. Bell Cranel and Otter stood amidst the crumbling remains of the 79th floor, their bodies aching with fatigue. The last battle against the Dullahan had pushed them to their limits, and though they had emerged victorious, the toll it had taken on them was evident. Bell could feel the exhaustion deep in his bones, and he knew that even Otter, the mighty Boaz warrior, was nearing the end of his endurance. "We need to rest," Bell said, his voice hoarse. "We won't last much longer if we keep pushing like this." Otter, his armor dented and scorched from the fierce battles they had fought, nodded in agreement. "You're right, but this place offers no respite. We'll move to the 18th floor, just hold tight, and wit." That Bell clasped his hands together and had Otter place his hand onto his shoulder and prepared to teleport them both to the 18th floor. "There we can rest and recover." Bell spoke in a tired tone. Otter looked at Bell with a mixture of surprise and relief. "You were prepared for everything, it seems." Bell gave a weary smile. "I try to be." After that, he activated the technique, and in an instant, the world around them dissolved into a swirl of light and shadows. When the light faded, they found themselves standing on the 18th floor, in the heart of the vast forest that filled the level. The 18th floor was a stark contrast to the depths they had just escaped. The air was warm, filled with the sense of fresh earth and blooming flowers. The sky above was a calming shade of blue, with a gentle breeze rustling through the leaves of the massive trees. It was a place of peace and tranquility, a sanctuary amidst the chaos of the dungeon. Bell and Otter made their way to a nearby stream, where they could wash away the grime of battle and tend to their wounds. Bell splashed the cool water on his face, feeling the tension slowly ebb away. Otter, though battered, seemed to regain some of his strength as he drank deeply from the stream. They set up a small camp near the water's edge, using what supplies they had left to prepare a simple meal. As they ate, the two warriors shared a moment of quiet camaraderie, their usual roles as rivals and allies blurred by the trials they had faced. "Together, we've come a long way," Bell said, staring into the flickering flames of their campfire. "But I can't shake the feeling that the dungeon isn't done with us yet." Otter looked up, his expression serious. "The dungeon is alive, Bell. It knows we're here, and it doesn't take kindly to those who challenge its depths. We should be prepared for anything." Bell nodded, his thoughts drifting to the battles that awaited them. Despite the calm of the 18th floor, he knew they couldn't let their guard down. The dungeon was merciless, and it would not allow them to rest in peace for long. After their meal, they lay down on the soft grass, allowing themselves a few hours of much-needed sleep. The forest around them was quiet, the only sound the gentle trickle of the stream. For a brief moment, it felt like they were far away from the dangers of the dungeon, in a place where they could let their defenses down. Bell awoke suddenly, his instincts screaming a warning. He sat up, his hand instinctively ready for his battle. Otter was already on his feet, his axe at the ready, his eyes scanning the surrounding forest. The peaceful atmosphere of the 18th floor had shifted. The air was thick with tension, and the ground beneath them began to tremble. Bell's heart raced as he realized what was happening? The dungeon, he muttered. It's angry. The tremors grew stronger, and from the depths of the forest, a terrifying roar echoed across the floor. The trees shook violently as a massive shape emerged from the shadows, a Juggernaut, the dungeon's living embodiment of vengeance. Its massive claws gleamed in the dim light, and its red eyes burned with a fury that matched the dungeon's malice. But it wasn't alone. From all directions, more Juggernauts appeared, their bodies moving with unnatural speed and ferocity. And then, the ground cracked open, and from the depths of the earth, a colossal figure began to rise. The Black Goliath, a monstrous giant, with jet-black skin and burning red eyes, towered over the forest, its immense body radiating raw power. It was a creature of legend, a nightmare born from the dungeon's deepest hatred for those who dared to challenge it. Bell and Otter were surrounded. Bell's blood surged with adrenaline, his exhaustion forgotten in the face of the overwhelming threat. He stood beside Otter, who had taken a defensive stance, his axe gleaming with magical energy. They were outnumbered, but they were not outmatched. Bell glanced at Otter, determination burning in his mismatched eyes. We end this here. No more running. No more hiding. We fight, and we win. Otter nodded, his grip tightening on his axe. Agreed. Let's show the dungeon what we're made of. With a battle cry, Bell charged forward, his body moving with lightning speed. He leaped into the air, his fist glowing with the familiar crimson light of his cursed technique reversal. Red! He shouted, unleashing a devastating blast that tore through the first Juggernaut, reducing it to dust. But the other Juggernauts were relentless. They closed in from all sides, their claws slashing through the air with deadly precision. Bell dodged and weaved between their attacks, his movements a blur as he countered with powerful strikes of his own. Otter was a whirlwind of destruction beside him, his axe cleaving through the Juggernauts with brutal efficiency. His movements were slower than before, his fatigue evident, but his sheer willpower kept him fighting. The two warriors moved as one, their synergy honed through countless battles. As they fought, the Black Goliath lumbered toward them, its massive fists smashing through the forest with earth-shattering force. Bell knew they couldn't afford to let the giant get close. He turned to Otter, shouting over the roar of the battle. I'll take down the Goliath. Hold off the Juggernauts. Otter didn't hesitate. Go. I'll cover you. With a nod, Bell sprinted toward the Black Goliath, his heart pounding with overwhelmingly high levels of excitement. The ground shook beneath the giant's steps, but Bell didn't falter. He summoned all of his strength, his cursed energy, surging through his body. The Goliath roared as it raised its fist to crush Bell, but he was faster. He leaped into the air, ascending to the giant's height. Laps blue, he cried, using his technique to draw the Goliath's massive head toward him. The force was overwhelming, but Bell's resolve was stronger. With a mighty swing, Bell delivered a crushing blow to the Goliath's head, the impact sending shockwaves through the dungeon. The giant staggered, its eyes flickering as it tried to stay upright. But Bell wasn't done. He summoned his energy once more, his body glowing with a brilliant light. This ends now. Bell shouted, pouring all of his power into one final attack. He unleashed a devastating flurry of blows, each strike shattering the Goliath's defenses until, with a final, earth-shattering punch, he brought the behemoth down. The Black Goliath collapsed to the ground, its body crumbling into black dust. Bell landed gracefully, breathing heavily but otherwise unscathed. He turned back to see Otter finishing off the last of the Juggernauts, his armor dented but his spirit unbroken. The dungeon's wrath had been fierce, but they had emerged victorious. The battlefield fell silent, the only sound the heavy breathing of the two warriors. Bell looked around at the carnage they had wrought, the adrenaline slowly fading as the reality of their triumph set in. They had faced the dungeon's fury and won. Otter walked over to Bell, his steps heavy but purposeful. You did it, Bell. You faced the Black Goliath and won. Bell smiled, his exhaustion finally catching up to him. We did it, Otter. We fought together, and we won. The 18th floor began to return to its peaceful state, the trees and grass slowly recovering from the destruction. But the news of their battle would spread quickly. As they made their way back to the main camp, they could already see adventurers gathering, their eyes wide with awe and admiration. Among them were members of the Loki Familia, their expressions a mixture of respect and curiosity. Even the high-ranked members, Eyest, Wallenstein, Tiona, Tyon, Lefia, and even Reveria, watched Bell with newfound interest, their gazes lingering on him as he walked by. Bell could feel their attention, but there was no time for greetings or conversations. They had faced the dungeon's wrath and emerged victorious, but they needed to return to the surface and recover. As they left the 18th floor, Bell was unscathed, his confidence bolstered by his victory. Otto walked beside him, his armor dented but his pride intact. They had proven themselves not only as warriors but as heroes, and the legend of their battle would soon spread throughout Orario. As the two finally left the dungeon, the population of the city gave them a wide berth as they saw Otto in his blood-covered glory, and Bell with his imposing aura, but the friendly smile made him look more approachable. The duo reached the guild building. The main building of the guild is called the Pantheon. It is a wide space with counters for adventurers to talk with their advisors and also has an exchange area. There are also small meeting boxes where adventurers can talk one-on-one with their advisor without anyone else hearing them. Aside from that, there is a library area. Most employees work on the first floor of the building while the high-ranking officials work on the second floor. They came directly to the exchange booth and dropped their loot inside, but the teller had such a shocked expression. Is it because of Otto or what? Oh, whatever. Bell thought. With a slightly impatient look as he tapped the counter, he got an idea. Yo, Otto. As he got the giant Boaz's attention, he continued, I wanna buy some sweets, so I'll leave YA to it, okay? Waiting just enough for a nod for an answer. He skipped out of the building like an overexcited kid. Location, Orario, the city of adventure. The sun was high in the sky as Bell stepped out into the streets of Orario, the warmth of the day washing over him and lifting his spirits. The city was alive with the sounds of bustling markets, lively conversations, and the distant clatter of adventurers preparing for their next expedition. Orario was a city of endless possibilities, its streets lined with shops, stalls, and eateries catering to every whim and desire. And today, Bell was on a mission, one that was far less dangerous but equally important, finding something sweet to satisfy his craving. As he wandered through the bustling streets, Bell's mind began to drift back to the events of the last few days, the battles they had fought, the monsters they had slain, and the challenges they had overcome. It all seemed like a whirlwind of action and intensity. But now, in the relative peace of Orario, Bell felt a sense of contentment. He had faced the dungeon's wrath and come out stronger, and now he could enjoy a brief moment of normalcy. He passed by various stalls, each one offering tempting treats, freshly baked pastries, candied fruits, and decadent chocolates, but none of them quite called to him. Bell was looking for something special, something that would hit the spot after the grueling adventure. Finally, after wandering through several streets, Bell's nose caught a whiff of something irresistible. He followed the scent, which led him to a small, unassuming shop tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. The sign above the door read, Freya's Delight, and the windows were filled with an array of beautifully crafted sweets. Intrigued, Bell stepped inside, his eyes widening as he took in the sight. The shop was a haven of confectionery wonders, with shelves lined with everything from delicate cakes to colorful macarons. The air was thick with the scent of sugar and vanilla, and Bell could feel his mouth watering in anticipation. Welcome, called a cheerful voice from behind the counter. A young woman with bright eyes and a warm smile greeted him, her hands dusted with flour and sugar. What can I get for you today? Bell glanced around, his eyes landing on a particularly exquisite-looking cake displayed in the center of the shop. It was a towering creation of chocolate and cream, topped with fresh berries, and drizzled with a glossy glaze. I'll take a slice of that, Bell said, pointing to the cake with stars in his eyes. It looks amazing. The woman beamed and quickly set about preparing his order. As she worked, Bell couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Here he was, an adventurer who had faced the depths of the dungeon and lived to tell the tale, indulging in one of life's simple pleasures. It was moments like these that reminded him of why he fought so hard, so that he could enjoy the world above, free from fear and filled with joy. A few moments later, the woman handed Belle a plate with a generous slice of the cake, along with a fork and a cup of tea. "Here you go. Enjoy." Belle thanked her and found a small table near the window, where he could watch the world go by as he savored his treat. He took his first bite, and the rich flavors of chocolate and cream danced on his tongue, filling him with a deep sense of contentment. As he ate, Belle let his thoughts wander. He thought of his friends, his familia, and the adventures that still awaited him. He knew that the path ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges and dangers that would test him to his very limits. But for now, in this quiet moment of peace, he allowed himself to simply enjoy the sweetness of life. After finishing his cake and tea, Belle left the shop feeling refreshed and energized. He made his way back to the guild, the sun beginning to dip lower in the sky as the day wore on. The streets of Orario were still bustling with activity, but Belle moved with a sense of calm and purpose. When he arrived back at the guild, he found Otter waiting for him near the entrance, his imposing figure standing out even among the crowd of adventurers. The Boaz warrior seemed to have finished their business, and he carried a large bag filled with supplies and items that Belle assumed were part of their loot exchange. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Otter asked as Belle approached. Belle nodded, a satisfied smile on his face. "Yeah, I did. I found this little shop that had the most amazing cake. It was just what I needed." Otter gave a small nod of approval. "Good. We should head back to the Twilight Manor. Now, Mistress Freya will want to hear about our descent into the dungeon." Belle agreed, and the two of them began their journey back to the manor. As they walked through the streets of Orario, Belle couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. The challenges of the dungeon were behind them, but new adventures awaited them on the horizon. And as long as he had moments like these, moments of peace, joy, and companionship, Belle knew that he could face anything the world had to offer. The grand halls of the Freya Familia headquarters stood tall and imposing, a magnificent structure that reflected the power and prestige of the goddess who resided within. The white marble walls gleamed in the sunlight, and the intricate carvings that adorned the pillars and archways depicted scenes of valor and conquest, all in homage to their goddess. Inside, the air was filled with a serene quiet, a stark contrast to the bustling city of Orario. Outside, members of the Freya Familia moved about with purpose, their expressions focused and disciplined. Among them, Belle walked with a determined stride, his mind set on one goal: to become stronger. After his recent journey through the dungeon, where he had pushed himself to his limits alongside Otter, Belle knew that he had to refine his abilities. The battles they had faced had shown him the gaps in his fighting style, and he was determined to address them. It wasn't enough to simply rely on his raw power. He needed to improve his mastery of the techniques he had inherited and develop new ones that would allow him to fight even the most formidable foes. Belle made his way through the labyrinthine corridors of the headquarters, eventually arriving at a large training hall. This was a space dedicated to honing the skills of the Familia's members, a place where countless warriors had trained to perfection under the watchful eye of Freya herself. The hall was vast, with high ceilings and walls lined with weapons and training equipment. The floor was smooth, polished stone, worn in places from years of use. Standing in the center of the hall, Belle took a deep breath, letting the familiar atmosphere of the training ground wash over him. He had spent countless hours here, pushing his body and mind to their limits. But today, his focus was on something more specific, improving his mastery of the abilities he had inherited. Belle's first objective was to refine his use of his limitless powers. These abilities, which allowed him to manipulate space and gravity, were incredibly potent, but they required a high level of control and precision. Belle had already mastered basic techniques like lapse blue, which allowed him to create a gravitational pull to crush his enemies, and reversal red, which unleashed a repulsive force in its combination, hollow purple. However, he knew there was more he could do with these powers. Standing in the center of the hall, Belle closed his eyes and focused on his breathing. He began to channel his energy, feeling the familiar hum of power coursing through him. He raised his hand, palm facing outward, and visualized the space in front of him. Slowly, he began to compress the air, creating a small, dense sphere of gravity. Blue orb, Bell murmured, giving a name to the technique he was developing. The sphere pulsed with energy, a miniature black hole that distorted the air around it. Bell concentrated, trying to maintain its stability. The orb wavered slightly, but he held it steady, his brow furrowed in concentration. Not enough, he muttered to himself. He needed to push the boundaries of what he could do with this technique. Bell expanded the sphere, increasing its gravitational pull until the surrounding air began to warp visibly. The strain was immense, but he gritted his teeth and held on, determined to push his limits. After a few more moments, Bell released the technique, the sphere dissipating into the air. He exhaled slowly, feeling the toll it had taken on his energy reserves. But he was pleased with the progress. The blue orb was still in its infancy, but it had the potential to become a devastating weapon in his arsenal. Next, Bell turned his attention to refining his use of cursed techniques. These powers, which he had inherited from Alfia, were a potent blend of magical and physical prowess. Bell had already demonstrated a strong affinity for these abilities, but he knew that true mastery required more than just raw talent. It required discipline and creativity. Bell began by practicing Silentium Fulgur, a technique that combined speed and silence with explosive power. The goal was to strike so quickly and quietly that the opponent would be incapacitated before they even realized they were under attack. He moved through the training hall with fluid grace, his body a blur as he executed a series of rapid strikes. Each punch and kick was imbued with cursed energy, creating small bursts of force that echoed through the hall. Bell focused on minimizing the noise, his movements becoming more refined with each repetition. The silence was almost eerie, broken only by the faint sound of his breathing. Faster, quieter. Bell whispered to himself, his body moving in a near-perfect rhythm. The technique was coming together, but he needed to push it further. To test his progress, Bell conjured an illusion of a monster in front of him, a frost giant, similar to the one he had fought in the dungeon. The illusion was a formidable opponent, its icy form looming over him with a menacing presence. Bell launched himself at the illusion, his movements swift and silent. He struck with precision, his fist connecting with the monster's chest in a burst of energy. The illusion shattered, dissolving into a wisp of mist. Good, Bell said, panting slightly from the exertion. Silentium Fulgur was shaping up to be a powerful technique, one that could catch even the most vigilant opponents off guard. Now remained only one thing: developing new powers. Satisfied with his progress on the techniques he already knew, Bell decided to experiment with something new. He wanted to develop a technique that would combine the powers of his limitless and Alfia, a fusion of space, manipulation and cursed energy that would give him an edge in battle. He began by focusing on the concept of domain expansion, a technique he had heard about but never fully mastered. The idea was to create a space entirely under his control, where his powers would be magnified and his opponents would be at his mercy. Bell concentrated, drawing on both his spatial manipulation and cursed energy. He extended his arms, creating a barrier around himself, a sphere of energy that pulsed with power. The space within the barrier was his domain, and he could feel the energy coursing through it, bending to his will. But maintaining the domain was a challenge. The energy was volatile, and the barrier wavered, threatening to collapse. Bell gritted his teeth, pouring more energy into the technique. Slowly, the barrier stabilized, and the domain solidified around him. He named the technique Azure Dominion. Within this space, Bell could manipulate the flow of time and space, slowing down his opponents and amplifying his own speed and power. It was an exhausting technique, but if mastered, it would be a game-changer in battle. Bell held the domain for as long as he could, feeling the strain on his body and mind. Finally, when he could maintain it no longer, he released the technique, the barrier dissipating into thin air. He dropped to one knee, panting heavily, but there was a triumphant smile on his face. Azor. Dominion was far from perfect, but it was a start. With more practice, he could refine the technique into something truly formidable. 1. Things stayed the same. The goddess watches. As Bell caught his breath, he became aware of a presence in the training hall. He looked up to see Freya, his goddess, standing at the entrance, her silver hair shimmering in the light. Her eyes, like pools of alluring purple hues of perfection, which were fixed on him, a small smile playing on her lips. "You've been pushing yourself hard, my dear Bell," Freya said, her voice soft but filled with admiration. "But I can see the results. You're growing stronger every day." Bell rose to his feet, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Thank you, Lady Freya. I want to be worthy of the power you've given me. I want to protect everyone I care about." Freya approached him, her gaze never leaving his. "And you will. I have no doubt that you will become a hero that people will remember for generations." Bell felt a warmth in his chest at her words. The path ahead was long and difficult, but with Freya's guidance and his unwavering determination, he knew that he could achieve his goals. "I'll keep training," Bell said, his voice filled with resolve. "I'll master these powers and become the hero I've always wanted to be." Freya smiled, a look of pride in her eyes. "I look forward to seeing it, Bell. Cranel, you are destined for greatness, and I will be by your side every step of the way." With renewed determination, Bell returned to his training, pushing himself harder than ever before. He had a long way to go, but he was ready to face whatever challenges came his way. And with Freya watching over him, he knew that he could overcome any obstacle in his path. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the Freya Familia headquarters. Inside, Bell Cranel stood before his goddess, Freya, who was seated on a grand, ornate chair in her private chamber. The room was bathed in soft candlelight, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. The air was thick with anticipation, for tonight was the night that Bell would finally update his status after weeks of intense training. Bell sat with his legs crossed before Freya, his heart pounding in his chest. He had pushed himself to the limit in his training, mastering new techniques and refining his existing powers along with the crazy dungeon dive he'd had with Otter by his side. Now, it was time to see the fruits of his labor. Freya extended her hand, her fingers lightly brushing the surface of Bell's back. A warm, bluish light emanated from her touch, spreading across his skin as she accessed his fauna. Bell felt a familiar tingling sensation as the divine energy worked its magic, updating his status with all the experiences and growth he had gained. Freya's eyes widened slightly as she read the results. A smile, both proud and slightly astonished, spread across her lips as she processed what she was seeing. Bell's growth had been nothing short of miraculous. When the light faded, Freya removed her hand, and Bell turned to face her, his expression eager. "How did I do, lady?" "Freya," he asked, unable to contain his curiosity any longer. Freya handed him a piece of parchment with his updated status inscribed on it. Bell's eyes scanned the page, his breath catching in his throat as he took in the details. Bell Cranel level, 6 strength, B705 endurance, C. 686 dexterity, B712 agility, C669 magic, B734 developmental. Abilities: Luck, X abnormal resistance, X mage, X magic resistance, X physical damage resistance, X, I don't know if this one is canon, but who cares, it's a fanfic for a reason, Spirit pleasure, X supreme. Light, X. Bell stared at the parchment in disbelief. He had not only leveled up but had jumped several levels in one go, landing at high mid-tier to low high-tier level 6. Moreover, he had acquired a staggering array of developmental abilities, all at their maximum level. The magnitude of his growth was beyond anything he had imagined. This is incredible, Bell whispered, his voice tinged with awe. "I never expected." Freya smiled, her eyes shimmering with pride. "You have surpassed all expectations, Bell. Your growth is a testament to your dedication and strength of will. You are truly destined for greatness." Bell's hands trembled slightly as he folded the parchment, a sense of purpose swelling within him. He had become stronger than ever before, but with that strength came new responsibilities. He was No longer just a promising adventurer, he was a force to be reckoned with, a hero in the making. "Thank you, Lady Freya," Bell said, bowing his head respectfully. "I won't let you down. I'll continue to grow stronger and protect those I care about." Freya reached out, lifting his chin so that their eyes met. "I know you will, Bell. You are the light that will guide this world through the darkness. Never forget that." With a renewed sense of purpose, Bell rose to his feet. The night was far from over, and there was much to be done. Tomorrow, he would venture into the dungeon once more, but this time, he would not be alone. Tomorrow, he decided, he will to go on another dungeon expedition. The next day, as the sun rose over Orario, Bell found himself at the entrance of the dungeon, accompanied by some of the strongest members of the Freya Familia: Otter, Alan Fromel, Hogni, Ragnar, and Hayden Selland. Their mission was clear: push their limits, reach new heights, and help Otter achieve the final push to level 8. Bell stood at the head of the group, a calm yet authoritative aura radiating from him. His recent level up and the acquisition of numerous maxed-out abilities had transformed him not just physically, but mentally as well. He was now a leader, and he'll try being a teacher, a mentor to those who had once been his seniors. "Today, we're going to push harder and faster than ever before," Bell said, his voice firm and confident. "We'll be heading straight to the 35th floor, and we'll be moving quickly. I want each of you to focus on your weaknesses and use this opportunity to overcome them. We're not just fighting to survive, we're fighting to grow stronger." The members of the group nodded in agreement, their expressions serious and determined. Even Otter, who was known for his stoicism, seemed to have a newfound respect for Bell's leadership. As they descended into the dungeon, the atmosphere grew tense. The air was thick with the scent of danger, and the sound of distant roars echoed through the stone corridors. But Bell was unfazed. His mind was clear, his senses sharp, and his resolve unshakable. He felt the power-up he had gotten from his update was truly phenomenal. The group moved quickly, cutting through the dungeon with a precision that only came from experience. Bell took the lead, his movements fluid and graceful, as he dispatched monsters with ease. His new abilities, particularly Supreme Light and Spirit Pleasure, made him a devastating force on the battlefield. Every strike he delivered was imbued with divine power, and the monsters that stood in their way were obliterated in mere moments. Otter, Alan, Hogni, and Hayden followed Bell's lead, working together seamlessly as they fought their way through the floors. Bell's guidance was invaluable. He pointed out weaknesses in their techniques, suggested new strategies, and even demonstrated new combat maneuvers that they quickly adopted. "Alan, you're relying too much on brute force," Bell said as they faced a horde of minotaurs. "Focus on precision and speed. Take them down before they have a chance to counterattack." Alan nodded, adjusting his stance and striking with increased accuracy, his spear piercing through the monsters with deadly efficiency. "Hogni, use your magic to create openings for Otter. Coordinate your attacks so that you can overwhelm them together," Bell instructed. Hogni responded by casting a series of spells that disoriented the monsters, allowing Otter to move in and deliver powerful finishing blows. The group moved as one, their progress through the dungeon nothing short of a blitz. In mere hours, they had reached the 35th floor, a feat that would have taken most adventurers days, if not weeks. The dungeon's inhabitants fell before them like wheat before a scythe, their combined strength proving too much for any foe. As they stood in the center of the 35th floor, surrounded by the remnants of their battle, Bell turned to his companions, a satisfied smile on his face. "Well done, everyone," he said, his voice filled with pride. "We've made incredible progress today. Otter, you're close to reaching level 8. Keep pushing, and you'll get there soon." Otter nodded, his expression serious. "Thanks to you, Bell. Your guidance was invaluable." Bell waved off the praise with a humble smile. "We're a team. We all contributed to this success. Let's stay here for a little and rest. We'll need our strength for the challenges ahead." As they began the journey back to a cave to rest themselves, Bell couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. He had grown stronger, not just in terms of power, but as a leader and a mentor. The respect he had earned from his peers, the progress they had made together, it was all proof that he was on the right path. And, as they rested their exhausted forms on the ground, Bell knew that this was only the beginning. The challenges ahead would be even greater, but he was ready to face them, no matter what. For he was Bell Cranel, and his journey to become a true hero had only just begun. The air grew heavier as Bell Cranel led the elite members of Freya Familia deeper into the labyrinthine depths of the dungeon. The walls, once rough and jagged, began to smoothen, the stones glowing with an ominous, faint red light that pulsed in sync with the distant rumblings of the dungeon's heartbeat. They were well beyond the safe zones now, far from the prying eyes of the surface world, and entering a domain where few had ever dared to tread. Bell's mind was a whirlwind of calculations and strategies. He could feel the dungeon's malevolence intensifying, the monsters growing more ferocious with every floor they descended. But this was exactly what they needed. For Otter to reach level 8 and for Alan, Hogni, and Hayden to break through to level 7, they needed to be pushed to their absolute limits. "Stay sharp," Bell said, his voice steady but carrying a tone of authority that commanded attention. "We're entering the lower floors, where even the smallest mistake can cost you your life. This isn't just about survival anymore, this is about growth." Otter nodded silently, his gaze fixed ahead, while Alan twirled his spear with an eager grin. Hogni and Hayden exchanged determined glances, their weapons at the ready. They trusted Bell implicitly, and they knew that under his guidance, they could achieve the impossible. The group pressed onward, the oppressive atmosphere weighing heavily on them. As they reached the 50th floor, Bell stopped abruptly, his 6 eyes glowing faintly as he surveyed the area. A massive, open chamber stretched out before them, the walls lined with eerie, glowing runes. At the far end of the chamber, a pack of high-level monsters prowled, minotaurs, Goliaths, and other horrors that even experienced adventurers would dread facing. Bell's lips curled into a faint smile. "Perfect. We'll start here." He turned to the group, his 6 eyes scanning them, gauging their readiness. "Alan, Hogni, Hayden, you'll take on the minotaurs. Work together, cover each other's weaknesses, and aim for their vital points. I want you to push yourselves beyond your limits. If one takes a good look, these beasts aren't the normal minotaurs. They had iron-like, shiny skin, and powerful weapons." The 3 nodded, determination etched on their faces. Bell then turned to Otter, who stood silent and imposing. "Otter, you'll face the Goliaths. There are 3 of them. I want you to fight them alone, no holding back. Use every ounce of your strength and make this your final push to level 8. Otter grunted in acknowledgement, his grip tightening on his massive axe. Bell could see the fire burning in his eyes, a desire to surpass his own limits and ascend to a new level of power. "And what about you, Bell?" Alan asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. Bell chuckled softly. "I'll be keeping an eye on all of you, but don't worry, I plan to have some fun myself." With a nod, Bell signaled for the group to move forward. The minotaurs, sensing their approach, roared in challenge, their muscular bodies tensing as they prepared to charge. Alan, Hogni, and Hayden sprang into action, their weapons flashing in the dim light as they engaged the beasts. The clash of steel against flesh, the roar of the monsters, and the grunts of effort from the adventurers filled the chamber. Alan darted in and out of the minotaur's reach, his spear striking with pinpoint accuracy. Hogni unleashed powerful magic attacks, his spells disrupting the monster's movements, while Hayden provided support, his swordplay precise and deadly. As Bell watched, his 6 eyes analyzed every movement, every decision. He could see the flaws in their techniques, the openings in their defenses, but he also saw their potential, their drive to improve, to evolve. They were fighting with everything they had, and Bell could see the sparks of growth beginning to ignite within them. Otter, on the other hand, was a force of nature. The Goliaths towered over him, their massive fists crashing down with earth-shaking force. But Otter met their attacks head-on, his axe cleaving through their thick hides with brutal efficiency. He moved with a deadly grace, his strength unmatched, his will unyielding. Bell's eyes flickered as he activated his 6 eyes at full capacity, his vision sharpening to an almost painful degree. The world around him slowed down, every detail crystal clear. But there was something more, a flicker of something just beyond his normal perception. And then it happened. A vision, brief but vivid, flashed before his eyes. He saw the next 5 minutes as if they had already happened. He saw Alan narrowly avoiding a Minotaur's crushing blow, Hogni casting a spell just in time to save Hayden from a fatal strike, and Otter delivering a final, devastating blow to the last Goliath. His body bathed in a brilliant, golden light as he ascended to level 8. Bell blinked, the vision fading as reality snapped back into focus. He felt a shiver run down his spine. His 6 eyes had advanced to the point where he could now see glimpses of the future. The power was intoxicating, but he knew he couldn't rely on it entirely. The future was always in flux, and even the slightest change could alter the outcome. Still, the vision had given him confidence. He knew they were on the right path. The battle raged on, and just as Bell had foreseen, Alan narrowly dodged the Minotaur's attack, his spear finding its mark and bringing the beast down. Hogni's spell erupted in a blaze of fiery light, incinerating another Minotaur just as it was about to strike Hayden. And then there was Otter, his massive frame illuminated by the golden light. As he swung his axe in a final, devastating arc, the last Goliath crumbled before him, its body disintegrating into dust as Otter stood victorious, his aura blazing with newfound power. Bell's heart swelled with pride as he watched Otter's transformation. The mighty warrior had finally achieved what he had been striving for, level 8. The chamber fell silent, the echoes of battle slowly fading away, leaving the group standing amidst the ruins of their enemies. Otter, breathing heavily, looked at Bell, his eyes filled with gratitude and respect. "Thank you, Bell. Without your guidance, I wouldn't have made it this far." Bell smiled warmly. "You earned it, Otter. You fought with everything you had, and you proved why you're one of the strongest adventurers in Orario." Alan, Hogni, and Hayden approached, their bodies bruised and battered, but their spirits unbroken. They had faced their own trials and had emerged stronger for it. "We did it," Alan said, his voice filled with exhaustion but also a sense of accomplishment. "We actually did it." Bell nodded, his 6 eyes still glowing faintly. "You all fought well. But remember, this is just the beginning. You've taken the first step, but there are still greater challenges ahead, and I'll be right there with you." As the group caught their breath, Bell's mind wandered back to the vision he had seen. The power to see the future, even if only for a few minutes, was a gift and a burden. But he knew he had to embrace it, to use it to guide his friends and comrades through the darkness that lay ahead. The dungeon was far from conquered, and their journey was just beginning. But with the strength they had gained, and with Bell leading the way, they were ready for whatever challenges awaited them in the depths. The descent would continue, and the legend of Bell Cranel and the Freya Familia would only grow, and it excited him to no end. At the 50th floor, the descent through the dungeon had been relentless. Floor after floor, the Freya Familia warriors pushed themselves beyond their limits, guided by Bell Cranel's expert leadership. Now, they stood on the 50th floor, a place where even seasoned adventurers dared not tread lightly. The air was thick with an oppressive aura, a palpable sense of danger emanating from every shadowed corner. The chamber they entered was vast, its ceiling disappearing into the darkness above. The walls were lined with jagged crystals that pulsed with a faint, eerie light, casting long shadows across the stone floor. Bell paused in the center of the room, his 6 eyes scanning the area, ensuring there were no immediate threats. "Gather around," Bell said, his voice calm but commanding. The group, Otter, Alan, Hogni, and Hayden, formed a loose circle. Around him, their expressions attentive and eager. "We've come far, but there's still many tricks for you to learn," Bell continued. "You've all proven your strength, but now it's time to refine it. What I'm about to teach you will take your abilities to the next level." Bell took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping over each of them. "Today, you're going to learn how to utilize your magical energy in a way that will reinforce your bodies and make your attacks even deadlier. This technique will allow you to infuse your strikes with magic, causing internal damage to your enemies, something even the toughest of monsters will find difficult to withstand. Alan frowned slightly, his curiosity piqued. You mean using our magic to strengthen our bodies? We already do that. To some extent. Bell shook his head. Not just strengthening. I'm talking about concentrating your magical energy, focusing it to enhance your physical attacks and defenses. You'll be using your magic to coat your body or weapon, but in a much more refined and powerful way than you're used to. Think of it like creating an invisible armor or an extension of your weapon, one that can penetrate even the toughest defenses and disrupt the enemy from the inside out. He extended his hand, and a faint, shimmering aura of blue magic began to swirl around it. The air around his hand crackled with energy as the magic became visible, forming a nearly tangible coating around his fist. This is the first step. By focusing your magical energy into a specific part of your body, you can enhance your strikes, making them far more powerful than ordinary attacks. Bell clenched his fist, and the energy around it intensified, becoming a blazing aura that seemed to distort the very air around it. He struck the ground with a controlled, yet powerful blow. The floor beneath them cracked and splintered, but it wasn't just the surface that was damaged. The force of the blow had penetrated deep into the ground, shattering the stone from within, sending a spiderweb of cracks spreading out from the point of impact. The group watched in awe, understanding immediately that this was no ordinary display of strength. This is what I call magical reinforcement, Bell explained. And this, he extended his hand towards a nearby boulder, focusing his energy until a faint, almost imperceptible tendril of magic extended from his fingertips into the stone. He didn't touch it physically, but the stone began to tremble. Before it exploded from within, shards of rock scattering in all directions. This is the principle of internal destruction. By forcing your magical energy into your target, you can disrupt it from the inside out. Hogni's eyes widened, and he nodded appreciatively. So, it's not just about brute force. It's about precision, about channeling our energy in a way that causes maximum damage. Exactly, Bell confirmed. It's not enough to just hit hard. You need to hit smart. This technique will allow you to take down enemies that would otherwise be nearly impossible to defeat with conventional methods. Otter stepped forward, his expression serious. How do we learn this technique? Bell smiled. I'll show you. The training begins. Bell spent the next few hours guiding them through the basics, demonstrating the technique repeatedly and helping each of them focus their magical energy in a controlled manner. It wasn't easy. Years of training had ingrained certain habits, and breaking those habits to adopt a new method of fighting took time and effort. Alan, ever the eager student, was the first to make significant progress. He concentrated his energy into his spear, the weapon glowing faintly as he mimicked Bell's movements. With a grunt of effort, he thrust the spear into the ground, and while the effect wasn't as dramatic as Bell's, a visible crack formed, signaling that the technique had been successful. Hogni followed suit, his mastery of magic giving him an edge as he infused his blade with energy. Hayden struggled initially but found his rhythm as Bell guided him, adjusting his posture and teaching him how to direct his energy more efficiently. Otter, however, was different. His raw power and experience made him a natural at the technique, and with Bell's guidance, he quickly learned to focus his immense magical energy into devastatingly precise strikes. Bell couldn't help but feel a sense of pride as he watched Otter progress. This was the warrior who had recently ascended to level 8, and yet he was still striving to grow stronger. Remember, this is only the beginning, Bell said as the group continued to practice. The real test will come when we face the monsters below. But I have no doubt you'll master this technique in no time. As they trained, Bell himself continued to experiment with his powers. His mind was constantly working, searching for ways to push his abilities even further. The concept of reinforcing his body with magical energy had come to him naturally, but now he sought to take it to the next level. Drawing from his vast reservoir of magical power, Bell began to focus on his surroundings. He could feel the energy that permeated the dungeon, the life force of the creatures that lurked in the shadows, the ambient magic that flowed through the very air. It was all connected, part of a larger whole, and Bell sought to tap into that connection. He closed his eyes, extending his senses outward, trying to absorb the natural energies around him. The process was slow, the energy elusive, but Bell was nothing if not persistent. He imagined himself as a conduit, channeling the energy from the world around him into his own body, merging it with his existing magic. The effect was subtle at first, a faint tingling sensation that spread through his limbs. But as Bell continued to focus, the sensation grew stronger, and he felt a surge of power unlike anything he had experienced before. His senses sharpened, his perception of the world around him becoming more acute, as if he could feel the very heartbeat of the dungeon. Bell opened his eyes, and the world seemed to come alive, with color and light. The faint glow of the crystals, the distant rumblings of the dungeon, even the auras of his comrades, all of it was clearer, more vibrant. He had tapped into something new, something powerful. He didn't fully understand what he had done, but he knew it was a step forward, a new avenue of power, one that he would continue to explore and develop. After hours of intense training, the group was exhausted but exhilarated. They had made significant progress, each of them now able to channel their magical energy in ways they had never thought possible. But Bell knew that the real challenge lay ahead, applying these techniques in the heat of battle, against enemies that would show no mercy. "We'll continue to refine these skills as we go deeper," Bell said, addressing the group. "You've all done well today, but remember, this is just the beginning. The dungeon will only get tougher from here, and so must we." Otter nodded, his expression serious but determined. "We're ready, Bell. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Bell smiled, his 6 eyes glowing faintly. "Good, because we're going to need everything we've got." With that, the group continued their descent, their newfound skills ready to be tested in the unforgiving depths of the dungeon. Bell could feel the tension in the air, the sense of anticipation as they prepared for the battles to come. But there was also a sense of camaraderie, a shared determination to grow stronger, to face the darkness head-on. And as they ventured further into the unknown, Bell knew that they were on the path to something great, something that would shape the future of Orario and the world beyond. The team had finally settled down to rest after an exhausting day of delving deeper into the dungeon. They had reached a secure area on the 53rd floor, a rare moment of respite in the hellish depths. The air was thick with tension, but there was also a sense of relief as they set up a makeshift camp. Otter, Alan, Hogney, and Hayden had all collapsed into a well-deserved rest. Bell, however, remained vigilant. He had volunteered to take the first watch, his senses alert to any sign of danger. He couldn't afford to let his guard down, not here, not when the dungeon was so unpredictable. Bell stood at the edge of their camp, his mismatched eyes scanning the dark expanse of the dungeon. His 6 eyes, attuned to the slightest shifts in the environment, detected the faintest tremors in the air. Something was off. The dungeon felt wrong, as if it were holding its breath, waiting to unleash something terrible. He knew the dungeon was alive, that it could react to intruders with increasing hostility. But this felt different, more deliberate, more malicious. His instincts screamed at him to be ready, to prepare for something beyond the ordinary threats they had faced. Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to shake. The air grew thick with a noxious scent, and Bell's heart pounded in his chest. His 6 eyes widened as he saw the dungeon walls shifting, rearranging themselves to form a massive, ominous chamber. The floor began to glow with a sickly green light, and from the shadows emerged countless figures, monsters of all shapes and sizes, their eyes glowing with malevolent intent. It was a virtual army, and at the forefront were the floor bosses, each more terrifying than the last. A dense, poisonous gas began to seep into the chamber, turning the air into a toxic miasma. The ground cracked and heaved, molten lava bubbling up from below, turning the once solid floor into a nightmarish landscape of fire and brimstone. The dungeon had transformed into a vision of hell on earth. Bell's mind raced as he realized the full extent of the threat. This wasn't just a random attack, this was a calculated move by the dungeon to wipe them out. The poisonous gas alone was enough to kill them, and the sheer number of monsters would overwhelm even the strongest adventurers. But Bell wasn't just any adventurer. He was Bell Crenel, and he had come too far to fall now. And so it started, Bell's battle for survival. Bell immediately activated his limitless and six eyes abilities, his body becoming enveloped in a thin, invisible barrier of energy. He could see every movement, every flicker of life around him with perfect clarity. His perception extended beyond the immediate battlefield, allowing him to anticipate every attack, every shift in the dungeon's deadly environment. The first wave of monsters charged at him, but Bell was already in motion. His movements were a blur, his fists and feet striking with pinpoint precision. With a thought, he reinforced his body using the magical energy he had mastered, his strikes infused with the power of internal destruction. Monsters shattered under his blows, their bodies disintegrating as the energy tore through them from within. The floor bosses roared in fury, their massive forms barreling towards him. Bell leaped into the air, his sword appearing in his hand as he summoned his full strength. His swordsmanship, honed through countless battles, had reached new heights. Each swing of his blade was a masterpiece of precision and power, cleaving through the toughest of enemies as if they were made of paper. But it wasn't enough to simply kill the monsters. Bell needed to control the battlefield. He began to channel his magic, drawing upon his sound-based powers to create a barrier around his comrades, protecting them from the poisonous gas and the lava that threatened to engulf them. As he fought, Bell's mind entered a state of hyperfocus. His six eyes and limitless abilities began to evolve, pushing beyond their limits. He could see not just the immediate future, but moments ahead, allowing him to predict the dungeon's every move. His control over Limitless became absolute, and he began to manipulate the very fabric of space around him, bending reality to his will. It was then that he felt it, a surge of power. Deep within him, a culmination of all his experiences, all his battles, all his growth, his mastery over art of armament and art of observation, his swordsmanship, his six eyes, his Limitless, and Alfia's magic, they all converged, and in that moment, Bell Crenel unlocked new powers. His armament evolved into a new form, one that allowed him to not only reinforce his body but also to project his energy outward, creating an indestructible armor around himself and his allies. His observation fused with his six eyes, granting him the ability to see further into the future, to anticipate every possible outcome in a fight. Bell's limitless ability also transformed, gaining a new aspect that allowed him to control the flow of time within a limited area. He could slow down or speed up time, giving him a decisive edge in battle. As the battle raged on, Bell unleashed these new powers with devastating effect. His enemies fell before him, their attacks rendered useless against his impenetrable defenses. His sword flashed through the air, cutting down monsters by the dozens, each strike infused with his overwhelming magical energy. The floor bosses, once terrifying in their power, were now nothing more than obstacles in his path. Bell's attacks shattered their defenses, his energy penetrating their massive forms and tearing them apart from within. One by one, they fell, their roars of defiance turning into screams of agony as they were destroyed. But the dungeon wasn't done yet. As Bell fought, more monsters continued to spawn, the dungeon throwing everything it had at him. The air grew thick with the stench of blood and poison, the ground shaking under the weight of the countless bodies that littered the battlefield. Bell fought on, his body moving on instinct, his mind in a state of perfect clarity. He was a force of nature, unstoppable and relentless. He could feel his power growing with each enemy he defeated, his level rising higher and higher as he pushed himself beyond his limits. The battle lasted for what felt like hours, the dungeon's relentless assault finally beginning to slow. Bell stood amidst the carnage, his breath coming in heavy gasps, his body drenched in sweat and blood. But he had done it. He had defeated the dungeon's onslaught, his power having grown to unimaginable heights. As the last of the monsters fell, Bell felt his body begin to shut down. The adrenaline that had fueled him throughout the battle was finally wearing off, leaving him exhausted beyond belief. He knew he had to stay awake, to make sure his comrades were safe, but his body refused to listen. He willed himself to stay on his feet, but his vision blurred, and the world around him began to fade. His last conscious thought was that he had done it. He had surpassed everyone, just as he had promised himself he would. Bell's mind finally gave out, and he blacked out where he stood, his eyes closing as unconsciousness took him. But even in his unconscious state, his sheer presence was enough to ward off any monsters that dared approach. The killing intent that radiated from him was so intense that even the bravest of creatures were too terrified to come near. When Bell finally awoke, he was surrounded by his comrades. Their expressions were a mix of awe and concern, their respect for him having grown tenfold. Otter, Alan, Hogni, and Hayden all looked at him with newfound admiration, their disbelief evident. You did it," Otter said, his voice filled with a rare emotion, pride. "You defeated them all, by yourself." Bell slowly sat up, his body aching but his mind clear. He could feel the changes within him, the power that had surged through him during the battle. He knew that he had leveled up again, but this time, it was different. He had jumped several levels, his growth so immense that it had shattered the usual limits. As he checked his status via the density of divinity flowing through it, Bell was stunned by what he sensed. His level had skyrocketed from mid-level 6, but it wasn't just his level that had changed. His status had evolved, and he was sure that he had gained new developmental abilities. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. He had truly surpassed everyone, even his wildest expectations. He was no longer just Bell Cranel, the adventurer who wanted to become a hero. He had become something more, something greater. The respect and admiration of his comrades were palpable, and Bell could see the awe in their eyes. But there was no time to bask in his accomplishments. They still had a mission to complete, and Bell knew that he couldn't rest on his laurels. "Let's move," Bell said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion in his body. "We've still got a long way to go." As they prepared to continue their descent into the dungeon, Bell couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in what he had accomplished. He had faced the dungeon's worst and emerged victorious. And now, there was no doubt in his mind. He was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, no matter how daunting they might be. He had become the strongest, and nothing would stand in his way. Bell Cranel and his companions pushed deeper into the dungeon, the oppressive atmosphere growing heavier. With every floor they descended, the air was thick with tension, and even the slightest sound echoed ominously in the vast, labyrinthine corridors. Bell led the way, his 6 eyes scanning the darkness, his limitless powers ready to activate at a moment's notice. Despite his recent surge in power, Bell remained cautious. He knew that the dungeon was a living entity, one that had already tested him to his limits. His instincts told him that it wasn't finished yet, that greater challenges lay ahead. And he was right. The first test came in the form of a powerful monster, an enhanced behemoth, its massive form barely fitting within the corridor. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent intelligence, and its hide was thick with a natural armor that deflected even the strongest of blows. The group quickly fell into formation, with Otter and Alan charging the beast head-on while Hogni and Hayden provided magical support. Bell hung back for a moment, assessing the situation. His 6 eyes revealed the behemoth's weak points, and he prepared to strike. But the behemoth was faster than he anticipated. It moved with surprising agility, its claws raking across the ground as it barreled toward Otter and Alan. They barely managed to dodge, and the sheer force of the creature's attack sent shockwaves through the corridor. Bell cursed under his breath. He couldn't afford to hold back. Activating his limitless powers, he dashed forward, his sword glowing with a fierce light as he aimed for the behemoth's vulnerable underbelly. The strike landed, but instead of a clean cut, Bell felt his blade resist, as if the behemoth's armor had absorbed most of the impact. The creature roared in anger, its massive tail whipping around to strike Bell. He narrowly dodged, but the attack was a harsh reminder. His power, while vast, was not infallible. The behemoth wasn't just a mindless beast, it was cunning, using its size and strength to force the adventurers into a defensive stance. "Stay focused," Bell shouted, his voice carrying authority as he regrouped. with his companions. We can't afford any mistakes. The battle dragged on, the behemoth proving to be a formidable opponent. It wasn't until they combined their strengths, Otter's raw power, Alan's speed, Hogni's precise magic, Hadine's support, and Bel's calculated strikes, that they managed to bring the beast down. Even then, it was a close call. The group was exhausted, their bodies bruised and battered. Bel wiped the sweat from his brow, his heart pounding in his chest. He had underestimated the dungeon once again, and it had nearly cost them. As they continued their descent, the challenges only grew more difficult. They faced an endless horde of monsters, traps that tested their reflexes, and puzzles that required both intelligence and intuition to solve. Each battle forced them to work together, to rely on each other's strengths. Bel found himself humbled time and again. His power was immense, but it wasn't enough to protect everyone on his own. He needed his comrades, their skills and abilities, complementing his own. The dungeon was relentless, throwing everything it had at them, but they persevered by fighting as a unit. In one particularly harrowing encounter, they were surrounded by a group of powerful wraith lords, their ethereal forms immune to physical attacks. Bel's magical energy proved effective, but the wraiths were cunning, using the darkness to their advantage, appearing and disappearing at will. Otter and Alan found themselves outmatched, their weapons passing through the wraiths harmlessly. Hogni's magic provided some relief, but it was Bel's ability to channel his energy into his comrades' weapons that turned the tide. By imbuing their attacks with his own power, they were able to strike the wraiths down, one by one. It was a hard-fought victory, and it left Bel drained. As they rested afterward, Bel reflected on the battle. He realized that, despite his strength, he was not invincible. The dungeon was teaching him a harsh lesson. Power alone wasn't enough. He needed to be smarter, to use every advantage he could get to protect those who were close to him. After what felt like an eternity, the group finally made their way back to the surface. Their bodies were weary, but their spirits were high. They had faced the worst the dungeon had to offer and survived, emerging stronger than before. As they approached the Freya Familia headquarters, they were greeted with cheers from their fellow adventurers. News of their exploits had spread, and they were welcomed as heroes. Freya herself was waiting for them, her eyes alight with pride and excitement. She could sense the changes in her followers, the growth they had undergone during their journey. But it was Bel who drew her attention the most. Otter, Alan, Hogni, and Hadine all received their status updates first. To Freya's shock, each one had leveled up, their stats reaching the maximum of S999 in all categories. The power boost was immense, especially for those who had reached level 7. Otter, in particular, had undergone a visible transformation. His body had become leaner, more muscular, shedding any unnecessary bulk. He radiated power, and it was clear that he was now a level 8. But it was Bel who had changed the most. As he stepped forward for his status update, Freya's excitement reached a fever pitch. She couldn't contain herself, and as soon as Bel was within reach, she threw herself into his arms, initiating a passionate kiss that left the entire room stunned. Bel was momentarily taken aback, but he returned the embrace, his arms wrapping around Freya as she clung to him like a koala. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were filled with admiration and love. "You've become so much stronger," Freya whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." Bel smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with his status. "Thank you, Freya, but I couldn't have done it without everyone's help." Freya nodded, though her gaze remained fixed on him. She knew that Bel was being humble, but she also knew that his growth had far surpassed anything they had expected. As Freya began the process of updating Bel's status, the room fell silent. Everyone watched with bated breath, eager to see the results. When Freya finished, she stared at the paper in her hands, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Bel, you've reached level 9. The room erupted in gasps and murmurs of shock. Level 9 was a feat that had been achieved only once before in Orario's history, by Hero Familia's legendary captain, the Empress. For Bel to have reached such a level was unprecedented. But that wasn't all. Bel had changed physically as well. He now looked more like an adult, his body taller and more muscular, his features more refined. He resembled an adult Gojo Satoru, but with a regal air that made him look like a noble warrior. His muscles were perfectly sculpted, his presence commanding and powerful. Freya could barely keep her composure as she looked at him, her mind reeling from the sheer magnitude of his transformation. She had always known Bell was special, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. Bell's new status was incredible, with all his stats in the A2's range. He had truly become a force to be reckoned with, a warrior, capable of challenging even the gods themselves. As the shock of Bell's level up began to sink in, Freya's excitement took over. She smiled seductively at Bell, her fingers trailing down his chest. You've earned some relaxation, don't you think? Why don't you spend the night with me? Bell, ever the gentleman, couldn't refuse. He nodded, a small smile on his lips. I'd be honored, Freya. The room buzzed with envy and admiration as Freya led Bell away, her excitement palpable. For Bell, it was a well-deserved reward after all the trials he had faced. He had surpassed everyone's expectations, becoming the strongest adventurer in Orario. But more than that, he had learned a valuable lesson. Power was nothing without the people who stood by your side. And as he spent the night with Freya, he knew that no matter how strong he became, he would always cherish those who had helped him along the way. This was no ordinary meeting, and everyone knew it. The news of Bell Cranel's recent leveling to an unprecedented level 9 had sent shockwaves through Orario. Freya, radiant and calm as ever, sat at the head of the table, her silver hair shimmering in the low light. Next to her was Bell, who had recently become the subject of much gossip and awe. His mere presence caused murmurs among the gods. There hadn't been a level 9 since the legendary empress of Familia. A voice broke through the chatter, reverberating with divine authority. Well then, shall we get to the matter at hand? It was Hermes, always eager to move things along. It seems Bell Cranel needs a new alias after his, rather impressive accomplishments. The gods began to throw suggestions, many of them ridiculous or vain attempts to capture Bell's essence. Some murmured titles like White Flash, referencing his blinding speed, while others proposed Infinite Fist for his overwhelming power. But it was clear the gods were more intrigued by his deep connection to Freya. Suddenly, Dionysus, his voice cool and laced with amusement, spoke up. What about something fitting for someone so closely tied to Freya? How about Vanadis Ordre, Freya's husband? The room fell silent. Freya's eyes glinted with amusement, but she said nothing, letting the room stew in the quiet. Vanadis Ordre. Loki broke the silence, leaning back in her chair, an eyebrow raised. The husband of the goddess of love and beauty herself? Bold choice. The gods glanced at Freya, who offered no objection. Instead, she smiled, a smile that sent chills down the spines of those gathered. It was as if she had silently approved the name. No one dared challenge the title. After all, she had the most influence in Orario, and her reputation was formidable. Hermes clapped his hands. Vanadis Ordre is then the husband of Freya. He laughed, but it was clear he was also gauging the room's reaction. Bell's promotion to level 9 and his new title solidified him as the most powerful adventurer in Orario's history. That much was clear. But before the gods could continue celebrating this naming, a new tension entered the air. Loki, usually lounging or snickering, suddenly sat upright, her eyes gleaming with mischief and seriousness. I've got a proposition, she said, her voice cutting through the chatter like a blade. Freya, Familia, you're the most powerful now, aren't you? With your level 9 adventurer. Her words dripped with challenge. But why don't we settle who the strongest Familia truly is? The room buzzed. Everyone knew Loki wasn't one to challenge without a plan. Freya's gaze narrowed, but she remained silent, letting Loki continue. I challenge Freya Familia to a war game, Loki declared, her smile growing wide. Winner takes all. If I win, I get all your members that are level 7 and higher. The gods gasped. That would mean Otter, Alan, and several others from Freya's top ranks. It was a bold, nearly suicidal challenge. Freya's expression was unreadable, her face a mask of calm. but her eyes glinted with something predatory. And what happens if I win? Loki. Loki's grin faltered for a second, but she quickly recovered. If you win, you get Finn, Reveria, Eyest, and the rest of my higher-leveled kids. This declaration sent the room into an uproar. Eyest Wallenstein, Reveria Ijos Alf, and Finn Daimler were the pride of the Loki Familia. Losing them would mean crippling the second strongest Familia in Orario. Freya leaned forward, her voice smooth and dangerous. Ah, you sure about this, Loki? Loki nodded, her grin now unwavering. Absolutely. We'll settle this in the fairest way possible, a one-on-one tournament. Single combat. If a fighter defeats their opponent, they stay in until they are defeated. Last person standing wins for their Familia. Bel's eyes widened slightly. He knew the strength of Loki. Familia, especially those three, Eyest, Finn, and Reveria, but he also knew that Freya Familia was equally powerful. Very well, Freya said, her lips curling into a smile. I accept. The tension in the room skyrocketed. The gods had never witnessed such a monumental event in their long existence in Orario. Freya and Loki, the two most powerful gods in the city, would pit their familiars against each other in a war Gamito settle who reigned supreme. Hummies stood, his voice brimming with excitement. Well, there you have it. A war game like none we've seen before. Freya Familia versus Loki Familia, two of the strongest houses in Orario. The news will spread like wildfire. The gods were already buzzing with excitement, some already placing bets and discussing strategies. But one thing was certain, this wasn't just a war game, it was a battle for dominance, a battle that would reshape the very fabric of Orario. As the meeting concluded, the gods and goddesses dispersed, their minds aflame with the upcoming tournament. Freya, however, remained seated, her eyes lingering on Bel, who had been silent throughout the entire exchange. Venardus. Order, she whispered teasingly, standing and walking over to him. The world will soon see just how powerful you truly are, my love. Bel met her gaze with a determined smile. I won't let you down, love. Freya smirked, leaning in to kiss him softly on the lips before whispering, I know. By the time the sun set that evening, the entire city of Orario was in an uproar. News of the upcoming war game between the two strongest familiars had spread like wildfire, and rumors of the emergence of the second level 9 in history, the one dubbed Venardus Order, were on everyone's lips. The stakes couldn't be higher, and as the city prepared for the tournament, all eyes were now on Freya Familia and their mysterious level 9 hero. The war for Orario's future had begun. The war game loomed like an impending storm on the horizon. The gods and adventurers of Orario knew that the upcoming battle between Freya Familia and Loki Familia would be unlike anything they had ever seen. To prepare, Bel Cranel took all the members of Freya Familia who had reached level 7 and above, Otter, Alan Fromel, Hogni Ragnar, Haydeen Selland. Day 1. Entering the abyss, the group ventured deep into the dungeon, descending to floors most adventurers dared not speak of. They passed the 50th floor in a matter of hours, moving with ease through the monsters and deadly landscapes. Their goal was not just survival, but improvement. Bel pushed them to their limits, both physically and mentally. Today, Bel announced, standing before them at the entrance to a volcanic chamber deep within the dungeon. The heat was overwhelming, the air thick with sulfur, and the ground trembled as rivers of magma flowed nearby. We train where the environment fights you as much as the monsters do. They split into pairs and groups, each member tasked with enduring the blistering heat and navigating the deadly terrain while sparring against each other. The heat from the molten lava cracked the ground beneath them, and waves of blistering air made each movement feel like wading through fire. Otter and his partner clashed with devastating force, the Boaz warrior's massive axe colliding with his opponent's spear in a flurry of blows that would level a lesser battlefield. Hogni and Alan trained under Bel's watchful eye, their swordplay becoming sharper with each strike. Haydeen and his adversary practiced their magic, controlling their spells with fine precision to maintain their concentration despite the oppressive heat. Underwater training, high-pressure test a few days later, Bel led the group to a deep cavern lake beneath the 70th floor. where the water pressure was immense and their vision was obscured in the murky depths. It was here that Bell taught them how to fight underwater, forcing their bodies to adapt to new forms of resistance. The crushing pressure forced them to move slower, testing their patience and endurance. This isn't just about brute strength, Bell said, swimming gracefully through the dark water as he effortlessly dispatched a group of aquatic monsters with his bare hands. You need control. The dungeon throws the unexpected at you. Adapt and overcome. They fought monstrous creatures beneath the surface, their movements becoming more refined with each passing hour. The water pushed against them, but soon they learned to move with fluid precision, mimicking Bell's no-perfect technique. Mind and tactical training are sparring and strategy as the days passed. The training shifted to focus on mental fortitude and tactical thinking. Bell pitted them against each other in brutal sparring matches, but with restrictions: no magic for the mags, no weapons for the fighters. This forced them to think outside their usual strategies, sharpening their adaptability. Outsmart your opponent, Bell emphasized during one of the strategy drills. Power alone won't win the war game. It's about using every advantage. Hayden, stripped of his magic, trained with Hogni in swordplay, her magical prowess, countered by the necessity of close combat. Otter fought without his forced to rely on hand-to-hand combat, while Bell sparred against Hayden in an all-out tactical battle of wits, both of them predicting and countering each other's every move. The descent deep into the dungeon. Bell eventually led them deeper into the dungeon than any of them had ever gone. The floors were darker, more hostile, and filled with creatures that could crush the unprepared in seconds. Bell gave them an objective: reach a certain floor with severe restrictions. Some could not use magic, while others were not allowed weapons or armor. Their task was to scout, report back, and navigate through hordes of monsters to complete the mission. Each adventurer had to survive, using their instincts and new skills. As they moved deeper into the dungeon, Bell kept watch from above, observing their progress. Despite his role as a teacher, Bell didn't stop training himself. He had magicians cast debilitating spells on him, slowing his movements, weakening his strength, and even blinding him for hours. In this state, he fought endlessly against monsters, honing his instincts, mastering the art of precise and efficient energy use. His control over the limitless was now beyond perfect. He could manipulate his cursed energy with near-zero waste, firing techniques like Cursed Red and Lapse Blue with minimal effort, turning them into rapid, deadly barrages. He also pushed the boundaries of his swordsmanship, mastering every form of combat he could get his hands on, from grappling to bare-knuckle brawling. His 6 eyes saw through everything now, and he learned to glimpse moments into the future, predicting his enemies' movements before they made them. This allowed him to refine his observational ability to the point where he could react to any threat with almost preternatural timing. The final test, facing the abyss toward the end of the month, Bell gave them one last trial. He led them to the very edge of the dungeon's known